Chapter 676. Mr. Song began to briefly explain what he had found out. After he finished, Mrs. N was the first to react. "That's impossible. Qinyu is my daughter. How could there be a mistake?" If Mr. Song hadn't investigated her attitude towards Qinyu over the years and witnessed how she treated his daughter with his own eyes, he might have believed her words. "I've already checked the information of the two families. My wife gave birth in the same hospital as you, so we can't rule out the possibility that there's a mistake," Mr. Song said patiently. Before they came to Gu Xingyin's place, they had actually gone to see Mr. and Mrs. N, but they had immediately turned hostile and chased them out when they heard that it was about the child. Mrs. N only said coldly, "That's impossible." Her repeated refusal to cooperate was infuriating. Mrs. Song flew into a rage on the spot. "It's not up to you to decide whether or not it's possible. You can tell who Qinyu resembles at a glance. Do you dare to let Qinyu do a paternity test with us?" Mrs. N retorted, "Who knows who you are? Do you think Qinyu will agree to do a DNA test just because you want it? I'm telling you, I won't agree to it." Mr. and Mrs. Song had obviously never seen such an unreasonable person. Mrs. Song was so angry that her body trembled. Mr. Song's heart suddenly skipped a beat. Shouldn't a normal person's first reaction be to find out the truth after hearing what he said? After all, if there really was a mistake, it would mean that their biological daughter had been separated from them for so many years. How could they not be curious and anxious at all? How could they be so sure that it was impossible? Moreover, it would be fine if Mr. and Mrs. N cherished their daughter like a treasure, but they clearly didn't like Qinyu at all. Why were they obstructing her? Could it be that there was something fishy about this matter? If that was the case, the DNA test had to be done. He ignored Mrs. N and turned to Gu Xingyin. "Qinyu, you heard my conversation with Mr. N just now. I really want to find my biological daughter. I'm afraid that she's not living a good life out there. Are you willing to do the DNA test with me?" Gu Xingyin was a little hesitant. Any 16-year-old girl who encountered such a situation would probably be in a mess. Before Qinyu could say anything, Mrs. N scolded her. "Qinyu, your father and I have been providing you with food and clothes all these years. Have we ever mistreated you? Now, you're actually listening to the nonsense of two people who came out of nowhere and want to do a paternity test. Are you trying to anger your father and me to death? Why are you so fierce?" Mrs. Song stood up and stood in front of Gu Xingyin. "She's only a 16-year-old child. Is this how you treat your daughter?" Mother N rolled her eyes. "I'm disciplining my own daughter. It's none of your business." "You." Mama Song still wanted to say something, but Gu Xingyin interrupted her. "I'm willing." Gu Xingyin's voice was not very loud, but it was very firm. "I'm willing to do a paternity test with you," she said word by word. Mrs. N was stunned for a moment before she exploded. "Qinyu, you ingrate. I've raised you for so many years for nothing, Mom." Gu Xingyin stood quietly at the side with a calm expression. "Tell me honestly, after all these years, have you really treated me as your daughter?" Chapter 677. Her words were clear and light, but there seemed to be an indescribable magic, which made Mother N unconsciously shut her mouth. "Ah, Mother N, when I was a child, you bought the latest toys for my sister, bought beautiful dolls, and took her to the amusement park to play. But what about me? You didn't even care if it fit me or not. You just bought 5 or 6 sets of new clothes, and that was all the new clothes I had for that year. Not to mention taking me out to play. I always remember that when I was in the 5th grade of primary school, an aunt from your company came to our house to play. When she saw me, she said, 'Is this your child?' I always thought that Qinchi was the only child in your family. When I was a child, I secretly cried and wondered if you didn't like me because I wasn't as good as my sister. But later, I understood that no matter how good I was, you still wouldn't like me. I've always wanted to ask why. If you really didn't like me, why did you give birth to me in the first place? I've also thought about it. Is it possible that I was really picked up or adopted? Is that why you don't like me so much? No matter what the truth is, I'm willing to accompany these two uncles and aunties to do a DNA test today. It's not that I really don't think I'm your daughter, but I feel that they really care about the biological daughter that they missed out on. I wish that they can find her soon. I don't want there to be another child like me in this world who suffers such unfair treatment. As for you, anyway, you don't like me so much. I'll do one more thing to make you unhappy. It'll just make you hate me more. She finished this sentence without changing her expression and showed a faint smile to Mrs. Song, who had already burst into tears. Auntie, let's go. Mrs. Song finally couldn't help but hold her in her arms. Qinyu, you're a good child. They don't know how to cherish you. Gu Xingyin's eyes were also a little wet. She said that she didn't care and didn't take it to heart, but it was just because no one had ever cared about her. Tears were the most precious in front of people who cared about her. Gu Xingyin forced herself to hold back the tears in her eyes. She smiled and said, I know. I've always been outstanding. They didn't treat me well. It's their loss to lose such an outstanding daughter. Mrs. Song also wiped her tears and took Gu Xingyin's hand out of the door. Whether you are my daughter or not, from today on, I will treat you as my daughter. The three of them stood up and walked out of the door, completely ignoring the An family's parents who were sitting on the side in a daze. The test results are out. The doctor in the white coat handed a document to Father Song. Even though they already knew the answer in their hearts, when they saw the number, Father and Mother Song were so excited that their eyes turned red again. Mrs. Song looked at Gu Xingyin, who was standing at the side in a daze. With tears in her eyes, she smiled and said, Yu, my child, are you willing to call me mommy? Gu Xingyin was still in a daze. She did not expect that her childhood suspicions were all true. They didn't like her not because she was bad, and it wasn't because she had an older sister. It was because she wasn't their daughter at all. A huge sour feeling overwhelmed her heart. She finally couldn't help but cry out loud. Chapter 678. When the Song family placed the information in front of the An's parents, they finally shut their mouths. Mrs. An was still unwilling to give up. She stared at Gu Xingyin and said, Yu, your father and I have never mistreated you all these years, have we? Now that you've found your biological parents, don't you want your father and I who have raised you for so many years? You'd better shut up. Mrs. Song finally couldn't stand it anymore. She was well educated, but in front of such a shameless woman, she couldn't hold it in. What do you mean by we haven't mistreated you? Do you mean we haven't mistreated you when we gave you a meal? I'll give you a sum of money as compensation for taking care of Qinyu all these years. As for the rest, I don't want to say more. She would treat her daughter well in the palm of her hand. People like them wouldn't have the right to trample on her. Ever since Gu Xingyin found out about that matter, he had become much quieter. Mr. and Mrs. Song also understood her and didn't force her to call them parents. It was already a pleasant surprise for them that she agreed to go back to the Song family with them. It was Gu Xingyin's first time to visit the Song family's house. Yu, this will be your home from now on. I've already tidied up a room for you. Your father and I bought everything personally. Let me take you to have a look now. Mrs. Song held Gu Xingyin's hand and walked upstairs as if she was showing off a treasure. Opening the door, Gu Xingyin saw a beautiful room. This was the room that all teenage girls yearned for. There was a big princess bed, piled up with plush toys that were bigger than a person. There were all kinds of exquisite and beautiful jewelry on the dressing table, and the wardrobe was full of the new products of the season from major brands. Do you like it? Mrs. Song looked at her expectantly. How could she not like it? Gu Xingyin's eyes suddenly turned red. She whispered, Thank you, Mom. Mrs. Song almost suspected that she was hallucinating. She asked in a trembling voice, Yu, what did you call me just now? Can you call me again? Gu Xingyin called her mom with tears in her eyes. Then, Mrs. Song hugged her with the same red eyes. Good, my good daughter. Gu Xingyin hugged her waist tightly and whispered, no one has ever been so nice to me. Her voice was very soft. She thought that Mrs. Song wouldn't be able to hear her, but in fact, she did. Mrs. Song sniffled and held back the tears that were about to fall. After a long time, she let go of Gu Xingyin. Look at me. I was so focused on bringing you up that I forgot that it's almost time to eat. You must be hungry, right? I've already instructed Sister Lin to prepare the meal. When she went downstairs with Gu Xingyin, the Song family was already sitting at the dining table. Other than Father Song, there was also Song Yi, as well as Song Tian, who was recuperating at home. When Song Yi saw Gu Xingyin, he was surprised. So it's her. His parents had already told him about his younger sister. He knew that Song Tian wasn't his younger sister. It seemed that the girl in front of him, who looked a little like his mother, was his real younger sister. Song Tian's feelings were very complicated. Not long after she was discharged from the hospital, Mrs. Song and her husband discussed for half the night. In the end, they chose to confess to her. She wasn't their daughter. When she was born, the hospital gave her to the wrong person. But after all, the Song family had raised her for so many years. They still had feelings for her. Mrs. Song said that she would always treat Song Tian as her daughter. But Song Tian didn't expect that the person she replaced was Qinyu. Chapter 679. Mrs. Song pulled Gu Xingyin to sit beside her. During dinner, Mrs. Song personally scooped rice for her and asked her what dishes she liked to eat. Song Tian watched as her parents circled around Gu Xingyin. She couldn't vent her anger no matter how hard she tried. She suddenly screamed, attracting the attention of Mrs. Song, who was scooping soup for Gu Xingyin. Mrs. Song looked at Song Tian in surprise. Tian, what's wrong? Tears welled up in Song Tian's eyes. She said pitifully, my legs suddenly hurt. This wasn't a small matter. Mr. Song quickly called the family doctor in charge of Song Tian and asked him to come over and take a look. Mrs. Song also comforted her. Once again, Song Tian experienced the feeling of being surrounded by everyone. She secretly and proudly glanced at her. Her eyes were full of power. Look, so what if you're our biological daughter? I'm the one who's loved the most. Gu Xingyin was stunned for a moment. Then, she lowered her head and ate her meal as usual. Suddenly, a drumstick was placed in her bowl. Gu Xingyin looked up. It was Song Yi. Don't always eat vegetables. It's not nutritious. Song Yi had a faint smile on his face. He saw all of Song Tian's little tricks. He didn't like it, but he didn't want to expose her in front of his parents. Gu Xingyin smiled at him. Song Tian's mood, which had just improved, became gloomy again. Song Yi's brother had been studying overseas. They didn't spend much time together, and their relationship was only faint. Song Yi treated her more like an older brother's responsibility to his younger sister. He didn't even put food in her bowl. Unlike Song Tian's gloominess, Mr. and Mrs. Song were more relieved to see this. Their eldest son rarely got close to others. Even with Song Tian, he was always indifferent. They were worried that he wouldn't get along well with Yu. Now, it seemed like they worried too much. Putting aside this interlude, the meal was quite harmonious. Gu Xingyin adapted very quickly to this new family. Gu Xingyin's father and mother always felt that they had mistreated this daughter. They always wanted to give her all the good things. Gu Xingyin seemed to be a little unaccustomed to this kind of enthusiasm, but every time, she would accept it with a smile. This made her parents feel gratified and touched. It was a rest day. As soon as Gu Xingyin came downstairs, she was stunned by the scene in front of her. The hall was filled with all kinds of colored lights and decorations. The most eye-catching thing was a huge birthday cake on the big table in the middle. Everyone in the Song family stood there and looked at her. Mama Song smiled at her and said, "Yu, happy birthday." Gu Xingyin's expression changed from confusion to joy. In Enchinu's memory, there was nothing about birthdays. That couple in the An family was willing to swap their 2 newborn children for the Song family's wealth. This was enough to show how selfish they were. How could they spend so much effort on Enchinu, who wasn't related to them by blood? Looking at Enchinu's blank expression, Song Tian felt a little disdainful. So what if Enchinu was the top student in the grade? She still looked like a country bumpkin who had never seen the world. What a disgrace. Gu Xingyin's face suddenly broke into a smile. It wasn't the usual faint smile, but a happy smile from the bottom of her heart. She walked briskly downstairs and hugged Mr. and Mrs. Song. "Mom, Dad, thank you. I'm very happy." Chapter 680. Then, she walked to Song Yi's side. "Brother, can I give you a hug?" she asked. Mr. and Mrs. Song were a little nervous. Although their eldest son looked gentle, he didn't like to be close to others. He didn't even hug Song Tian when he was young. What if he rejected Yu and made her feel bad? However, they worried too much. Song Yi didn't know why, but when he saw the girl looking at him with her dark eyes, he felt that he couldn't reject her. He opened his arms to her. Gu Xingyin jumped into his arms happily. Smelling the light lotus fragrance, Gu Xingyin was very satisfied. Even though they couldn't be lovers, it felt good to be a younger sister who was doted on by her brother. Song Tian sat in the wheelchair and watched her brother and Enchinu hug each other. She clenched the wheelchair so hard that her fingernails left marks on it. She would never forget how she acted like a spoiled child and asked her brother to hug her when she was young. However, she had always been like a fish in water in front of her parents, but her brother rejected her time and time again. Back then, she could sense that although her brother didn't dislike her, they weren't very close either. She thought it was because of his personality. After all, her brother was so gentle and polite even to her parents. But why? Why would he put food in Enchinu's bowl and hug her? Was it because she was his biological sister? She had been his sister for more than 10 years. In his eyes, she couldn't compare to a so-called biological sister, whom he had only known for a few days. Tian. Song Tian was brought back to reality by Gu Xingyin's voice. So she was the only one left. She wanted to hug her. Song Tian looked at her coldly. She didn't like Enchinu from the bottom of her heart. If it weren't for Enchinu, she wouldn't have had such an accident in her life. Enchinu must hate her too. Song Tian took away her status as the heiress of the family, but she still pretended to be so friendly. It was disgusting. "I don't want to give you a fake hug. Enchinu, I don't like you." Song Tian had been spoiled by the Song family since she was young. She never cared about other people's feelings when she spoke. Anyway, her parents would always listen to her. But this time, she miscalculated. "Song Tian, what are you talking about?" Papa Song's complexion turned somewhat ugly. He looked at Yu and then at Song Tian. He really felt that he had spoiled Song Tian all these years. "Where's your upbringing? Is that what I taught you since you were young?" Mama Song also had a look of disapproval on her face. Gu Xingyin stood there awkwardly, not knowing what to do. Song Tian felt wronged after being scolded by Papa Song. She yelled, "It's true. I don't like Enchinu. Our family was originally fine, but everything changed when she came. Dad, Mom, you don't like me anymore. Is it because I'm not your daughter?" This time, Papa Song was also speechless. This kind of thing was a huge blow to the two children. Tian Tian had been spoiled by them since she was young. She probably couldn't accept that she wasn't the daughter of the Song family. Song Yi immediately looked at Gu Xingyin, who was standing there. After hearing Song Tian's words, the girl was probably the most embarrassed and at a loss. She was supposed to be the little princess of this family, but in Song Tian's words, she became an outsider who ruined her happy life. Chapter 681. She stood there awkwardly, seemingly uneasy because of Song Tian's words. But at that moment, Mr. and Mrs. Song were thinking about how to comfort Tian Tian. No one would have thought that compared to Song Tian, who had always been pampered in this family, the cautious and Qinyu was the one who needed the most protection. Song Yi felt that this girl was the most innocent and pitiful. He didn't know what possessed him, but he couldn't bear to see her sad. Whenever he saw her unhappy, he would feel as if his heart was being pricked by thin needles, and the pain would be long and painful. Gu Xingyin was standing there when she suddenly felt a warmth approaching her. Then, her hand was held. "Dad, Mom, I don't think we can continue with this birthday party. I'll take you out to play," Song Yi said to Mr. and Mrs. Song. Mr. and Mrs. Song looked at their eldest son in surprise. They only realized how hurtful Song Tian's words were when they saw Gu Xingyin's reddened eyes. Go, go. Have fun." Mrs. Song also felt that it wasn't appropriate for Yu and Tian Tian to be together, so she hurriedly said to her eldest son. Mr. Song wanted to say something, but he looked at Gu Xingyin and sighed in the end. Song Yi held Gu Xingyin's hand all the way until they arrived at the garage. Song Yi then let go of her hand and they got into the car. Song Yi turned sideways and fastened her seatbelt for her. "Thank you, big brother," said Gu Xingyin. Song Yi only felt that hearing the word brother from her mouth made him feel very satisfied. He pretended to be unhappy. "If you say that again, I won't be happy. Since you're already calling me big brother, it's only right for a big brother to pamper his little sister. Don't let me hear the word thank you from your mouth again." He looked at the girl in front of him, who had been nervous because of the first half of his sentence, and he couldn't help but smile. "Did your family call you Yu in the past?" asked Song Yi. Gu Xingyin shook her head. "No, they just called me by my name." Song Yi was silent for a moment. Such a simple sentence was enough to let him know that this girl was not favored in the other family. Then, "I'll call you Qin Qin from now on. Only big brother can call you that," he suddenly said. "Sure." Gu Xingyin smiled. It felt so good to be cherished and loved by someone. "Alright, my dear Princess Qin Qin, where do you plan to go today?" Song Yi asked with a smile. Gu Xingyin tilted her head and seemed to think for a while. Then, she shook her head. "I don't know. I've never been to an amusement park before." When she said this, she was very calm, as if she was talking about something very trivial. Song Yi's heart ached for a moment. He controlled his emotions and said with a smile, "Then big brother will take you out to play today." He brought Gu Xingyin to the largest amusement park in the city. This place was a sacred place for couples to date, and it was also the favorite place for children. After he parked the car and walked out, he saw Gu Xingyin standing there waiting for him. She was holding 2 big cotton candies in her hands. He couldn't help but smile. This little sister of his looked mature and steady, but in fact, she was still a little girl on the inside. When Gu Xingyin saw him, she smiled and handed him one. Song Yi was surprised. "For me?" Chapter 682. Gu Xingyin nodded with a smile. "When I was young, I used to watch other kids holding cotton candy in their hands at the amusement park. I was always envious of them. But no one took me there and no one bought it for me. When I grew up, I gradually stopped thinking about it. She opened her mouth and took a bite. It was so sweet. I just saw it and suddenly wanted to buy one to try. Song Yi looked at her and suddenly said, "Actually, I've never eaten cotton candy before." "Thank you, Qin Qin." Gu Xingyin was surprised. "You've never eaten cotton candy before?" Song Yi nodded. He didn't tell her that it was because he was precocious and had no interest in these things that kids liked. That day, Song Yi, who had never been to an amusement park before, accompanied Qin Yu, who had never been to an amusement park before. They played all the rides in the amusement park. When they got home, the sky was already dark. Song Yi received a phone call. He said, "Yeah, Qin Qin and I are outside. We won't be home for dinner. Don't wait for us. We're still outside." "Okay." He hung up the phone. Gu Xingyin asked, "Was it Mom?" Song Yi nodded and turned around. "I just told her that we won't be home for dinner." "Qin Qin, you won't be mad, right?" Gu Xingyin shook her head. After what happened during the day, she wouldn't be happy to see Song Tian. It was better to be outside. "Let's go. I'll take you to a place." Gu Xingyin followed Song Yi. He parked the car outside a hotel. The waiter led them to the reserved seats. Gu Xingyin didn't know when he booked a private room. As soon as she opened the door, she covered her mouth in surprise. An exquisite and beautiful cake was quietly placed on the table. The bright red number, 16, was burning faintly. Song Yi led her to sit down. "I messed up the birthday party during the day. I can only make it up to you. Time was tight, so I couldn't make it better." Song Yi explained to her. "Next year, I'll definitely give Qin Qin a perfect birthday party," he said seriously. Gu Xingyin shook her head and looked at Song Yi with a smile. "To me, this is already the most perfect birthday of my life." The birthday party during the day was not just her birthday. She saw clearly that the huge cake had Song Tian's name on it. Now, there was only Qin Yu in the small private room. Her brother, Song Yi, had spent a lot of effort to prepare a birthday celebration for her. She closed her eyes and began to make her wish. Song Yi looked at Gu Xingyin under the candlelight. Her long and curly eyelashes cast a small shadow on her smooth cheeks. Her rosy lips were curved, showing that she was in a good mood. From the first time he saw her, he felt that this girl was beautiful. Now that he knew that she was his sister, he felt that Gu Xingyin was perfect in every way. Gu Xingyin opened her eyes and met Song Yi's focused gaze. His face softened under the candlelight. His pitch-black eyes were filled with gentleness as he looked at her. She couldn't help blushing. It was already very late when the siblings got home. Song Tian had already returned to her room to rest because of her leg injury. Papa Song and Mama Song were waiting for them in the living room. When they saw Gu Xingyin coming back, they both looked apologetic. Chapter 683. They didn't say much. They only asked them if they had a good time today and told them to go and rest. Mr. and Mrs. Song could tell that in their eldest son's heart, this sister who had just returned was much more important than Song Tian. Even when he took Yu out to play today, he was indirectly telling them that he was very dissatisfied with Song Tian. Gu Xingyin went back to her room to take a shower. She came out with her wet hair. Before she could dry her hair, she heard a knock on the door. Mrs. Song opened the door and came in with a plate of milk and fruit. "Why is your hair still wet?" Mrs. Song saw that Gu Xingyin's hair was still dripping with water, so she complained intimately. Gu Xingyin explained instinctively, "I just came out of the shower. I didn't have time to dry it yet." She pointed at the hairdryer she had just found. Mrs. Song walked over to take the hairdryer and asked her to sit down. "Let me do it." Gu Xingyin sat down obediently. She could feel a hand gently holding her hair and fondling it. She probably knew why Mrs. Song was here. They both knew what happened today. The one who had been wronged was Gu Xingyin. Mrs. Song and her daughter didn't think about it for now. They enjoyed this rare moment of warmth. After her hair was dry, Mrs. Song put down the things in her hands and sat down beside Gu Xingyin. You, I know. Tian was unreasonable today. You've been wronged, Mrs. Song said. Gu Xingyin lowered her head and didn't say anything. She didn't know how to reply. It was impossible to say that she wasn't angry or wronged. Song Tian disliked her for disturbing her life. She didn't even blame her for taking away the life that should have been hers. However, she couldn't say those words in front of Mrs. Song. And Qinyu wasn't Song Tian. Unlike her, and Qinyu didn't grow up in such a carefree family. And Qinyu couldn't complain so impulsively and directly. How could Mama Song not know that her daughter wasn't feeling good? She sighed and reached out to hug Gu Xingyin. I have already discussed it with your father. When Tiantian's leg is healed, we will send her back to her own home. The Yin family must miss their daughter very much. Gu Xingyin lay quietly and obediently in her arms. After a long time, she finally gave a soft hum. The Song parents seemed to have told Song Tian the news. Gu Xingyin didn't see Song Tian with her own eyes, but she heard that she threw a huge tantrum and cried, saying that she didn't want to leave the Song family. However, father and mother Song were determined this time. Although they couldn't bear to part with their daughters, they knew that with both of their daughters in the Song family, there were some conflicts that couldn't be resolved. Both were flesh and blood, but if father and mother Song had to choose, their biological daughter, who had grown up outside and had never experienced the slightest bit of familial warmth, would undoubtedly make them more reluctant to let go. Moreover, the DNA test was already out. They had no reason to let Song Tian continue to stay in the Song family. The Song family had already discussed it with the Yin family. They could visit Song Tian while she was recuperating. They could familiarize themselves with each other. They wouldn't be strangers when Song Tian returned to the Yin family. As for what happened back then, seeing the Yin family's attitude, Mrs. Song and Mr. Song knew that there was something fishy going on. However, they didn't intend to pursue it for Song Tian's sake. This could be considered their last bit of appreciation for Song Tian. Chapter 684. When Gu Xingyin returned to the Song family, it was almost the end of the semester, so the long winter vacation came soon. In the past holidays, and Qinyu was very busy. She didn't want to stay at home, so she went out to do some part-time jobs to earn pocket money. This time, she had truly enjoyed a holiday that belonged to her. Song Yi was also at home. He had been studying abroad before. This time, he came back home after graduation and went directly to the Song enterprise to accumulate experience. On this day, Gu Xingyin had just finished breakfast when someone came to visit her. And Qinyu. Mrs. N saw Gu Xingyin at first glance, but she didn't dare to recognize her. Was the girl in front of her really the daughter they had raised for more than 10 years? She still looked the same, but there was a big difference when she looked at her carefully. Mrs. N couldn't tell the specific difference. She just felt that she looked like a rich young lady in a TV show. Gu Xingyin kept the smile on her face. My name is Song Qinyu now. As early as the second day after she returned to the Song family, her father transferred her household registration and other information to the Song family. As for the name, he didn't change it after consulting with Gu Xingyin. Mrs. N's face was a little gloomy. She had been looking at the Song family since she came in. Such a luxurious and beautiful villa, and there were even servants and nannies in the house. Her Tian, the name she got from the Song family. She had lived in such a place since childhood, and she was a real rich young lady. But now, her identity as Tian was exposed. The Song family was going to take their biological daughter back. Her daughter was going to go back to her own home. Mrs. N couldn't tell whether she was happy or unhappy at this moment. She was happy because she was going to see her biological daughter who had been separated from her for many years. She was unhappy because she did such a thing in the past, thinking that her daughter could live a good life. But now the truth was found out. Gu Xingyin didn't want to talk more with them. She nodded and went upstairs to her room. Mrs. N and Mrs. N went to Song Tian's room under the guidance of the Song family's nanny. Song Tian was also informed that her biological parents would come to see her. Deep down, she resisted. In her heart, her father was like Father Song, a handsome, mature, and capable man. Her mother was like Mama Song, an elegant, beautiful, and well-maintained lady. She had never met Enchinu's parents, but Song Tian knew that the Enchinu's family wasn't well-to-do. They were just ordinary working-class people. How could they be good? During this period of time, Song Tian had been hating herself. Hating that she was not the flesh and blood of the Song family. Hating that Father Song and Mother Song were so cruel to send her away. Hating that the An family was not a wealthy family like the Song family. She hated Gu Xingyin the most. Without her, she would be the unique little princess of the Song family. Instead of being about to return to that ordinary family, everything would be back to square one. She sat on the bed in a daze as the door opened. Tian Tian. A slightly agitated voice sounded. Song Tian raised her head and looked at the woman in front of her. She had obviously dressed up today, but Song Tian frowned. This woman was wearing new clothes, but they were obviously not branded. The texture was not good either. She had also put on some makeup, but it couldn't hide her old skin. The smell of cheap perfume wafted towards her, making her very uncomfortable. All of this made her feel disgusted. Chapter 685. She asked coldly, "Who are you? Why are you calling me by my name?" Mrs. N didn't expect her daughter to be so cold. She looked at Song Tian who was sitting in the wheelchair with a cold expression. There was a sense of superiority in her eyes, which made her feel uneasy. Mrs. N tugged at the corner of her clothes. After a long time, she said, "Tian Tian, I'm your mother." She looked at her daughter whom she hadn't seen for 16 years. Her eyes turned red. "Mother?" Song Tian seemed to be provoked by this word. She sneered and said, "My mother is the top jewelry designer, Ms. Bai Baoyin. Who are you?" Mrs. N thought that her daughter didn't know about the mix-up between the two families. She explained anxiously, "No. No, you're not the daughter of the Song family. I'm your mother. You and Enchinu were swapped at the hospital." Song Tian hated it when people said that she wasn't the daughter of the Song family. She shouted, "Enough." She looked at the two people who were said to be her biological parents and said coldly, "Since we were swapped at that time, it means that Enchinu and I are destined to be together. Since it's been wrong for so many years, why don't we just let it be? Why did you come back 16 years later?" Mrs. N looked at her in shock. She had thought a lot before she came. She thought that her daughter would be as nervous and excited as she was about to meet her biological parents. She thought that maybe she would feel strange and awkward. She never thought that her daughter would be so repulsed. She didn't even want to acknowledge her and her father. Her heart was a little cold. She looked at Song Tian with a sorrowful gaze and mumbled, "But, now the Song family already knows who their real daughter is." Seeing her mention this again, Song Tian felt that this woman was doing it on purpose. She was purposely repeating this matter to tell her that she, Song Tian, was just a sparrow that had flown up to a branch. The 16 years of luxury she had lived was just something she had stolen. Now that the real phoenix was back, she would soon be beaten back to her original state. The more she thought about it, the angrier she became. She picked up the things beside her and threw them at them. "Go away. Go far away. Who's your daughter?" "I'm Song Tian. I'm the daughter of the Song family. He's not from the Yin family. Mother-in looked at her daughter in disbelief. The disgust and strangeness in her eyes when she looked at her and her husband was so obvious. This child clearly used this kind of behavior to tell them, she hated them. She couldn't help but cover her mouth and cry. Why did it turn out like this? She was her biological daughter. Back then, for her daughter to live a good life, she went against her conscience and did such a thing. But now, she was unwilling to acknowledge them. Mrs. Song, who was outside the door, left quietly. She had heard that the couple was here and was worried that Song Tian would feel awkward with them, so she came over to take a look. However, she did not expect to hear such a conversation. Even though she was unhappy, this couple was still her biological parents. How did Tian become like this? In the room, Father-in, who had been silent all this time, suddenly reached out and grabbed his wife. He looked at his daughter with a very strange gaze. You phone, let's go. She wants to be her eldest miss. We can't give her what she wants. As a man, he was not as emotional as his wife. Therefore, he could see things much more clearly than his wife. Chapter 686. Mr. and Mrs. N came with a heart full of expectations, but left with a heart full of disappointment. Before they left, they remembered to say goodbye to the host. Gu Xingyin and Mama Song stood together to receive them. Father-in looked at the mother and daughter together. The two of them stood like this, afraid that no one would doubt the relationship between them. Qinyu. He paused for a moment before saying, Dad. Uncle N and Auntie N have let you down all these years. Now that you're back at home, you must be happy. Gu Xingyin smiled politely and looked at her mother. Don't worry. Dad, Mom, and brother are all very good to me. Mama Song didn't like Mr. N's tone. When Yu was in their house, he didn't care much about her. Now that she was back, he stood out to be a good person. She smiled faintly. Yu is my daughter. Her father and I will treat her like a precious treasure. Mr. N, you don't have to worry about her. Mr. N opened his mouth but didn't say anything. He wanted to pull his wife away. But Mama N stood still. She looked at Mama Song and said, What about Tian? Tian has lived in the Song family for so many years. She has long regarded this as her home. Don't you want her? For the first time, Mama Song felt that she couldn't communicate with people. What was this? Now that everyone knew that Song Tian wasn't the daughter of the Song family, did Mama N not want her biological daughter back and wanted to keep her in the Song family? She smiled politely and said, Now that we know that Tian is your daughter, of course, we can't do anything to separate you. My husband and I have already discussed it. Tian's leg is injured, so it's inconvenient for her to move. When her leg is healed, you can come and take her home. Thinking of her daughter's attitude, Mama N felt that she had to explain things for her daughter. She asked Mama Song sharply, Are you so heartless? Tian has been raised by you since she was a child. She has long regarded this as her home and you as her biological parents. Now that you found your daughter, you don't care about family ties and abandon her. Mama Song was speechless. Her good upbringing prevented her from swearing. She was so angry that she trembled. There was actually such a shameless person in this world. What kind of logic was this? Sending her back to her biological parents, this is called not caring about kinship and being heartless. Her hand suddenly felt warm. Gu Xingyin was holding her hand. Gu Xingyin looked coldly at Mother N, who seemed to be very indignant, and said, Auntie N, you're wrong. I've been raised by you for 16 years, but I've never felt any familial warmth from you. When I wanted to go back to the Song family, I didn't see any reluctance on your face. As for Song Tian, you've only just found out about her existence, yet you're already thinking so wholeheartedly for her. It can be seen that the kinship of blood is not something that can be offset by the kindness of raising her. In my opinion, only when she returns to the An family can she enjoy your deepest kinship. Mrs. An was rendered speechless by Nchinu's words. She had never liked Nchinu. Now that Nchinu had rebutted her, she subconsciously wanted to scold Nchinu. Father An pulled her back. That's enough, don't make a fool of yourself here. Even he couldn't bear to listen to what his wife had just said. Didn't he see that the expressions of the Song family's mother and daughter had changed? Chapter 687. Mother An still didn't want to give up, but Father An pulled her out of the door with an ashen face. Mother Song was so angry that she sat on the sofa alone, sulking. Gu Xingyin poured her a glass of water. Mom, don't be angry. Mother Song held the glass, the warmth of her palm warming her heart. She looked at her obedient daughter in front of her and couldn't help but feel pity in her heart. Her Yu grew up in such a family. Yu, Mom and Dad are sorry, she said softly. She was sorry because she didn't find out the truth all these years, and also because she and her husband owed their daughter for the decision they made today. Mother An's behavior today showed that she was very concerned about Song Tian's biological daughter. This made Mother Song know that her and her husband's guess was probably right. What happened back then wasn't necessarily a mistake by the hospital. Mother An's treatment of Yu was very likely because she had always known that she wasn't the An family's daughter. She loved this daughter very much, but now she had to choose not to know the truth for the sake of another child she had raised since she was young. If they chose to sue, what would happen to Tian in the future? They would send Song Tian back to the An family and treat Yu even better in the future. By the end of the summer vacation, Song Tian's leg was almost healed. Father and Mother Song ignored her crying and pestering and sent her back to the An family. Father and Mother Song were indeed not used to losing a child they had watched grow up in the family, but there was also something that made them very happy. Their eldest son, Song Yi, had a very good relationship with Yu. He and Song Tian had been siblings for 16 years, but in terms of closeness, he couldn't even compare to Yu, who he had only known for 2 months. Even Father and Mother Song couldn't help but sigh. Perhaps this was really fate and fate. Gu Xingyin and Song Yi's relationship was indeed very good. During this summer vacation, Gu Xingyin thoroughly enjoyed the feeling of being spoiled by her brother. Song Yi had already taken her to all the fun places around the area. Brother, you'll spoil me like this. She pouted and acted coquettishly when they returned home that day. This was a side that only appeared in front of Song Yi. Normally, Gu Xingyin was reserved and cold. Even in front of Father and Mother Song, she was more like an obedient and sensible beast. Only in front of Song Yi would she reveal her girlish side. This made Song Yi very happy. He felt that he was the most important person in his little sister's heart. He reached out his hand and gently patted Gu Xingyin on the top of her head. So what if I spoil you? Big brother will take care of you for the rest of your life. He was 1.8 meters tall. Gu Xingyin, who was 1.6 meters tall, looked very petite when she stood in front of him. Hearing this, Gu Xingyin was silent for a moment. She said softly, if Big Brother has a girl he likes in the future, the one he dotes on the most will not be me. Song Yi was stunned for a moment, but he quickly smiled and said, that won't happen. I promise that the one I like the most will be Qin Qin. She didn't say that she wouldn't fall in love with someone else. Gu Xingyin felt unhappy. She expressed that she was a little emotional. She snorted and said, it doesn't matter if Big Brother has a girl he likes in the future. In any case, there will be someone who will like me in the future. He will dote on me more than Big Brother. She had to admit that she was a petty person. She had said those words on purpose to anger him. As expected, when he heard this, Song Yi's face darkened. Chapter 688. The space in the car was very small, and Gu Xingyin could clearly feel the low pressure coming from Song Yi. She didn't seem to understand why this man was suddenly unhappy. "Brother, what's wrong?" The word brother woke Song Yi up. Yes, he was her brother. She would meet another man in the future, and that man would be responsible for holding her hand and accompanying her in the future. He wouldn't be in her future. When he thought of this possibility, Song Yi felt as if there was a fire burning in his heart, giving him the urge to destroy something. How could this be possible? Song Yi felt that something was wrong with him. He always thought that he only doted on Qin Qin as an older brother, but today, he was enlightened by her words. This kind of possessiveness was abnormally strong. It was far from being as simple as an older brother to his younger sister. He returned to his previous gentle self and smiled at Gu Xingyin. "It's nothing. Qin Qin, don't say such things in the future." Seeing that he recovered so quickly, Gu Xingyin snorted softly and didn't say anything. Song Yi had calmed down on the surface, but his heart was still in turmoil. He needed some time to figure out what kind of feelings he had for his younger sister. He used to complain and feel conflicted, but now he was incomparably glad that he had come to this family. Soon, it was time for school to reopen. Gu Xingyin was in her second year of high school. They hadn't seen each other for only one holiday, but her classmates were surprised to find that the straight-A student Qinyu was completely different from before. No, Qinyu. Her name on her homework book had changed to Song Qinyu. She wore branded clothes that made them envious. She even had a personal chauffeur to drive her to and from school every day. Some people even saw many times that the person who picked her up was a very handsome man. That man didn't look like a student, so some scheming people secretly guessed that she might have been taken advantage of by a rich man because of her beauty. Until someone recognized that the very young and handsome man was Song Tian's older brother, who was very rich in school. Song Tian used to be very high profile in school, so there were many people who paid attention to her. Soon, a piece of news spread in the school. It turned out that Qinyu, the straight-A student, wasn't slept with by a rich man. She was the real rich man's daughter. When they were born, the hospital mistook them for each other. Song Tian was raised by the Song family as their daughter for more than 10 years, while Qinyu, the heiress of the Song family, lived an ordinary life for more than 10 years. What a melodramatic plot. The students who heard the truth all expressed, "I thought that this kind of plot could only be seen in TV dramas for rich families. I didn't expect it to actually happen in real life." Sure enough, art came from life. This was the truth. Now the truth was out. Qinyu had become Song Qinyu. She had returned to the Song family and lived the life of a rich heiress. Many people were enlightened. No wonder Qinyu usually didn't like to talk. Even if she was just sitting there calmly, she still had an aura that made people not dare to disturb her. This was her innate temperament. Since the real young mistress of the Song family had returned, then what about Song Tian? Everyone's attention was on Song Tian, the fake miss. Chapter 689. Song Tian had been very unhappy during this period. She was sent back to the Yin family. The Yin family's house was so small that her room was not even a third of the size when she was in the Song family. Although the Yin family's parents tried their best to treat their daughter better after more than 10 years, after all, the conditions were here. It was impossible to satisfy her like in the Song family. She liked a piece of clothing and wanted to buy it, but mother rejected her as soon as she saw the price. What a joke! She and her husband couldn't even afford such a piece of clothing with their combined monthly salary. If Song Tian could barely endure all this, then being in school was truly a form of torture for her. She didn't tell them that she had changed her name and still asked people to call her Song Tian. However, some things couldn't be hidden. For example, she took a taxi to school every day. She didn't want to take the bus. When some of her friends talked to her about some new brands, they asked her in surprise why she didn't buy them. In particular, there had been rumors recently that Chinyu was the real eldest daughter of the Song family. She had changed her name to Song Chinyu. The fact that Song Tian had been sent back to the An family was also revealed. Now, when she walked into school, she felt that all kinds of eyes were looking at her. Those people must be secretly saying bad things about her behind her back. Those who used to be jealous of her must be laughing at her now. Song Tian felt that she was about to go crazy. When school was over, her psychological defense was pushed down. Song Tian was blocked by a few girls at the entrance of the school's corridor. This place was relatively remote, and people rarely came here. She was on duty today, and she was here to take out the trash. At this time, almost all the students had left, so naturally, no one would come here. What do you want? She raised her chin arrogantly and asked them. Song Tian knew these people, and they were all from good families. Not long ago, the leader of the group was ruthlessly mocked by her because she was wearing a counterfeit, and the two of them became enemies. Seeing her like this, the girls sneered disdainfully. Hey, Song Tian. Oh, no. The girl paused and looked at her with a malicious smile. See, I accidentally called you by mistake. You should be in Tian. Do you really think you're the eldest daughter of the Song family? You're so arrogant. You're just lucky that you were brought to the Song family and became the eldest daughter of the Song family for more than 10 years. But now, your good luck has come to an end. The real young miss has returned home. You're just an imposter. Why are you still pretending to be virtuous? You. Song Tian looked at her and trembled with anger. This was the scar that she did not want to be exposed the most. As long as she didn't say it out loud, she could still pretend that no one knew. In the eyes of outsiders, she was still the high and mighty young Mississippi. What about me? Did I say something wrong? The girl stopped smiling. She's just an imposter from an ordinary family. You used to be so arrogant. Now, let's see what else you have to be arrogant. She seemed to be so angry that she raised her head and slapped Song Tian's face. I've already slapped him long ago. How did you mock me back then? You made me lose so much face in front of the whole class. I admit that I'm a coward. If you're the eldest daughter of the Song family, I admit that I can't afford to offend you. But Song Tian, you didn't think that you would end up like this, did you? The girl looked at Song Tian's clothes. You bought these big brands when you were in the Song family, right? You think you're worthy? Chapter 690. The girls left. Song Tian squatted in the corner. Her school uniform jacket had been taken off and thrown on the ground. There were a lot of footprints on it, but this was nothing. The dress she was wearing, which she had bought last month at the Paris Fashion Week, had been maliciously cut into pieces and hung on her body. Her scalp was still hurting. Just now, those girls weren't polite to her. They directly pulled her hair and dragged her to the ground. A low sobbing sound came from the corner. After a long time, Song Tian expressionlessly picked up the unbelievably dirty school uniform from the ground. She patted the dust off it and wrapped herself up. Tian, what's wrong with you? Mother-in looked at her daughter, who had just entered the door, and seemed a little strange. She asked in surprise. Song Tian ignored her with a cold face. She went straight around her and went back to the room. The door was closed with a bang. Mother-in was shocked and immediately smiled bitterly. This daughter, since the day she came back, was very silent. She always stayed in the room silently by herself. She wasn't close to her husband and wife. Song Tian hid in the quilt and cried. It was all their family's fault. Just like that girl said, if she was still the eldest daughter of the Song family, she wouldn't dare to provoke her. At the end of the day, this society depended on one's status. When Motherin called her for dinner at night, Song Tian ignored her. She was very annoyed with this family now, and also annoyed with herself. Song Tian became more and more silent day by day. In contrast, Gu Xingyin was very comfortable. The Song family was very distressed for this daughter. They wished they could pick the stars from the sky just to make her happy. What made Gu Xingyin strange was that Song Yi seemed to be very busy for a few days after he sent her home that night. The two didn't see each other for a few days. When they met again, Gu Xingyin felt that this brother seemed to have changed somewhere. However, Gu Xingyin didn't take it to heart when she saw that he was still extremely indulgent towards her. In the school, there were more and more people who approached Gu Xingyin intentionally or unintentionally. Although this school was a high school, many students already knew some of the ways of the world. After knowing how big the Song family was, no matter how cold Gu Xingyin was, there would be people who kept approaching. However, Qinyu had a cold reputation, and Gu Xingyin only needed to act like that to get rid of most people. Our school's top student, Song Qinyu, got first place again. Song Qinyu, I feel like she's really getting more and more beautiful. Song Tian felt as though she was surrounded by Song Qinyu. Song Qinyu's name was like a curse that haunted her. She became more and more silent, and her close friends no longer hung out with her. After school that day, Song Tian was stopped by someone. This boy's name was Su Jun. Su Jun's family was very rich, and he had always liked Song Tian. He was also the only person in their small circle who still treated Song Tian well after it was revealed that she wasn't the eldest daughter of the Song family. What's the matter? Song Tian frowned. She didn't want to have too much contact with these people, because every time she interacted with them, she realized once again that they were people from two different worlds. Chapter 691. Su Jun looked at the girl in front of him with heartache. She was wearing a proper school uniform, and she was much thinner than before. Her face was a little pale, and she was no longer as energetic as before. Tian, you, Song Tian interrupted him. Are we close? Su Jun's face darkened. He was obviously hurt when he heard this. However, when he looked up and saw Song Tian's appearance, the sadness in his heart disappeared. Without any explanation, he grabbed Song Tian's hand and strode outside. Su Jun, what are you doing? Song Tian frowned. She wanted to break free from Su Jun's hand, but he was too strong for her to shake off. Su Jun took her to a dessert shop near the school. Song Tian was stunned for a moment. This was one of her favorite places to come. Su Jun used to accompany her to eat. However, she had never been here again since she returned to the Yin family. The Yin family only gave her one meal a week. Although she had lived a good life in the past, she had never thought of saving money, so she didn't have much savings. Tian, let me ask you. Are you really willing to live like this for the rest of your life? Su Jun chose a private room and closed the door. He lowered his voice and said to Song Tian. Song Tian frowned. What do you mean? Su Jun was also a little nervous. What he was about to say was also a very shocking thought to him. He was a little afraid, but he wanted to be with Tian. However, if Tian wasn't the eldest daughter of the Song family, his parents wouldn't have agreed to him being with a girl from an ordinary family, even if they used to like her a lot. Su Jun asked, do you think Uncle Song and Auntie Song like you? As soon as he said this, Song Tian sneered. Su Jun, I thought you were really kind. In the end, you're just like them. Are you here to mock and humiliate me? She stood up and was about to leave when Su Jun stopped her. Tian, stop. Listen to me. Don't you understand what kind of person I, Su Jun, am and what kind of feelings I have for you after so many years? Song Tian stopped in her tracks. Su Jun said, Tian, I don't have any ill intentions. I don't want you to be better. Song Tian sat back down. Answer my question first. Song Tian's expression changed slightly. Of course Dad and Mom dote on me. Before that incident, they were the best parents in the world. Even brother couldn't compare to their love for me. Su Jun's voice lowered even further. But now, they've found their biological daughter. Song Tian's face darkened. And Qinyu is only relying on the fact that she's related to Dad and Mom by blood. I don't believe that she, who has just returned to the Song family for a few months, can compare with me, who has lived in the Song family for 16 years. Even now, she still insisted that she was Song Tian and called Gu Xingyin and Qinyu. Su Jun was relieved to hear that. Well, Tian, think about it carefully. If An Qinyu is gone, you'll be Uncle Song and Auntie Song's only daughter. Song Tian looked at Su Jun in shock. What do you mean by that? Su Jun's face was cold. If something happens to An Qinyu, Uncle Song and Auntie Song will be very sad. At this time, if you go and comfort them, they will definitely transfer all their longing and love for their daughter to you. Chapter 692. It was the first time Song Tian looked at Su Jun so carefully, as if it was the first day she knew him. Her voice trembled. What do you mean? Su Jun's voice was fierce. Exactly what I said. As long as An Qinyu is gone, you'll have a chance. Song Tian swallowed. How can I make her leave? Su Jun glanced at her and said coldly, aren't accidents very common in today's society? Song Tian's eyes widened. She looked at Su Jun, are you crazy, Su Jun? She suddenly realized that her voice was too loud. She subconsciously lowered her voice and said, what you're doing is illegal. Su Jun reached out and pressed her hand down. Tian, it's just an accident. If we don't say anything, no one will know. He felt that Song Tian's hand was cold and even trembling slightly. It was clear that the girl's heart was not calm. He didn't force her to make a decision. He said slowly, Tian, think about it carefully. After An Qinyu appeared, what kind of influence did she bring to your life? Look at what kind of life you're living now. As long as she's gone, everything will go back to how it was before. Think about it carefully. Song Tian used to be. Song Tian couldn't help but think along with his words. In the past, Song Tian was a true young miss. Every time she went out, there would be a large group of people surrounding her. Although she knew that there weren't many people who were sincere, but the feeling of being sought after by so many people, was really wonderful. She enjoyed a lot of love and material superiority. Her train of thought was abruptly cut off. She looked up and saw Su Jun looking at her with a smile. Song Tian shook her head in panic. That's not right, Su Jun. That's not right. Su Jun's voice was very low, but it seemed to reach Song Tian's mind. Tian, there's no right or wrong in this world. What's good for you is right. Song Tian stood up. In her uneasiness, the chair under her made a loud noise. But she didn't care about it. She only said to Su Jun, let me think about it. Let me think about it. Su Jun didn't stop Song Tian from leaving. He knew what Song Tian would choose. The fact that she did not leave at the first moment had already exposed her true thoughts. Song Tian returned home. At night, she was eating absent-mindedly. Mother-in and father-in were nagging, the company organized a trip abroad, but I turned it down. Song Tian's attention was attracted by this sentence. Mother-in continued, now Chi-Chi is in college and preparing to take the postgraduate entrance exam. Tian is about to enter her third year of high school. Where can I find the spare money to go abroad? What's more, the manager said that the colleagues who don't go this time will be counted as overtime, and their salary will be doubled. Hearing Mother N's proud tone, Song Tian, who didn't have much of an appetite, put down the bowl. I'm full. Mother N's voice stopped abruptly. She looked at Song Tian's back as she left, and then looked at the rice in her bowl that she hadn't touched at all. The chicken wing she had picked up for her was still lying there alone. The atmosphere at the table suddenly became heavy. Song Tian lay in bed, thinking about Su Jun's words during the day. Are you willing to live in a family like the Yin family for the rest of your life? Was he really willing to accept this? She asked herself. Chapter 693. The answer was no. How could she accept it? She thought of Mother N's complacent tone during the meal, and her heart felt a burst of irritation. What was the point of such a family being entangled with such trivial matters every day? Their minds were filled with discounts and savings. What was the point of living a mediocre life? She had already made up her mind. The Song family. Really? Gu Xingyin looked at Song Yi happily. He had just told her that he would put aside his work and take her on a 2-month vacation before the 3rd year of high school. Mr. and Mrs. Song were very supportive of this. They didn't have to worry about Yu's studies at all. They were more than happy to see their son and daughter get along well. Of course it's true. Song Yi looked at the girl in front of him who was smiling brightly. He couldn't help but reach out his hand to rub her head. Ever since he had figured out his feelings, the way Song Yi looked at his sister was obviously different. She was still too young at 16 years old. Song Yi felt a little melancholy. He was certain that if he went to his parents and confessed his feelings for Qin Qin, his handsome and well-maintained father would turn into a Tyrannosaurus Rex and beat this brat to death. Song Yi silently made a decision when he saw the smile on Gu Xingyin's face. He would pamper her until she felt that no one else in the world would treat her better than him. She would be more delicious if he fattened her up. He would wait for 2 more years until she turned 18. He would confess to his parents himself and pave the way for everything. All she had to do was to hold his hand and follow him. Song Yi didn't consider what would happen if Gu Xingyin only treated him as an older brother. How could the little white rabbit escape from the sweet trap that the big bad wolf had set up? What should we do? Song Tian took the initiative to look for Su Jun. Su Jun smiled. He knew that Tian would know what was best for her. I know some people. Gu Xingyin had never stopped paying attention to the boy who had killed Qinyu with a car. What surprised her was that the Su Jun in this world seemed to be much more rational. He and Song Tian even had a secret plan on how to make her have an accident. Of course, in this world, Su Jun wouldn't do something as stupid as hitting someone with his car. 2 high school students wouldn't even choose a reliable place to chat when they were conspiring. Gu Xingyin obtained a recording from the system and handed it to the police anonymously. With the system's anonymity, no matter how powerful the judicial system of this world was, it would not be able to find out anything. There were anonymous reports like this every day. Most of them were trivial matters, and some were even their own conjectures. It was rare to see such genuine information provided by Gu Xingyin. The police immediately took it seriously and quickly locked onto the 2 people chatting in the audio. As the parents of the other party, Mr. and Mrs. Song were the first to be called by the police. Mr. and Mrs. Song listened to the recording with ashen faces. They didn't even need to know who the other party was. We received an anonymous message and quickly checked the information of the people mentioned in the recording. We also determined who the 2 people were, the police officer explained. The only thing we're not sure about now is whether the conversation is real or a prank. That's right, the police officer explained. Chapter 694. After the police left, Father Song couldn't hold it in any longer and cursed out loud. This. He was obviously very angry. When Gu Xingyin returned home that day, she saw her parents sitting on the sofa. The atmosphere was a little solemn. She changed her shoes and sat beside Mother Song. "Mom, what's wrong?" Mother Song looked at her daughter, who looked so much like her, and saw the undisguised concern on her beautiful face. This was her daughter. Someone actually wanted to harm her. No one could touch her daughter. It's nothing. She held Gu Xingyin's hand and smiled. Your father and I just saw the news. It said that it's not very peaceful here recently. We're thinking about you. Gu Xingyin smiled. I'm at school. There's no safer place than school. Mother Song said, I just discussed with your father. We'll let your Uncle Duan send you to school every day. Otherwise, I won't be at ease. Uncle Duan was the Song family's chauffeur. It was said that he was from the military when he was young. Gu Xingyin didn't refuse. She knew what her parents were worried about. She also knew from the system that the police had come to their house today. They most likely knew what Song Tian and Su Jun did. They didn't tell Gu Xingyin about this, but they told Song Yi when he came home that night. This son was already an adult. In father and mother Song's hearts, he would be the pillar of the Song family in the future. When the two of them grew old, Yu would have to rely on him to take care of her. Song Yi's face turned cold when Mother Song mentioned this. With Uncle Duan looking after her, I'm very assured. Song Yi's face calmed down. He knew Uncle Duan's ability. He had learned a thing or two from Uncle Duan when he was young. Uncle Duan could easily defeat 10 ordinary adults. His driving skills were also needless to say. Uncle Duan was an amazing person who could drive at the speed of life and death during peak traffic in Shanghai. At night, Gu Xingyin had just finished showering when someone knocked on the door. Brother? She was a little surprised. This brother rarely came to her room at night. Song Yi looked at the person in front of him. She was wearing a light pink bathrobe. The collar of the bathrobe covered her body tightly, but it couldn't hide the snow-white skin of her neck. Because she had just taken a bath, her hair was still damp, and it hung softly on both sides of her face. It added a hint of womanly charm to the immature Qin. He had heard the news from his parents. Even though he knew that nothing had happened, he was still eager to see her. Song Yi looked down at her and suddenly said, Brothers Qin is going to grow up too. Gu Xingyin. Song Yi chuckled softly when he saw the confused look on the other party's face due to his abrupt words. It's nothing. Big brother just wanted to see you. Gu Xingyin was still a little confused, but she still smiled obediently. Her appearance made Song Yi's mood very good. He reached out and rubbed her hair. He said gently, Rest early. Gu Xingyin nodded. Brother, good night. Song Yi smiled and nodded. Good night. He lifted his leg and was about to leave when he suddenly remembered something. Oh right, I forgot something. Gu Xingyin looked up in confusion. A touch of wet heat was printed on her right cheek. The girl in front of him stared at him with wide eyes. Her gaze was full of shock. Song Yi winked at her. Good night kiss. Chapter 695. Gu Xingyin, don't lie to me just because I haven't graduated from high school. What kind of goodnight kiss would a brother and sister this old be? This isn't normal. Could it be that Song Yi couldn't resist the attraction between the two of them and had feelings for me? No, this isn't right. Gu Xingyin covered her face and took a step back. She looked at Song Yi and said seriously, Brother, I've already grown up. Song Yi's smile didn't change. Oh. Gu Xingyin continued, goodnight kisses are used to coax children. Brother, don't do such things. Song Yi said in surprise, really? But usually, only young girls say things like, I've grown up. Gu Xingyin, the enemy's level was too high. Fortunately, Song Yi didn't harp on this. He said, okay, I won't tease you anymore. Go to bed early. Gu Xingyin breathed a sigh of relief. Brother, good night. Song Yi walked out of the room with a smile. As soon as the door closed, his face darkened. She was avoiding him. He knew that he was too impatient. The goodnight kiss just now was definitely unexpected. In fact, he wanted to kiss her directly on the lips. However, her attitude clearly showed that she was avoiding his intimate actions. She wanted to maintain their relationship at the level of brother and sister. But what I want is not just brother and sister. Song Yi lowered his eyes. Fortunately, the next day, Song Yi looked no different from usual. This made Gu Xingyin breathe a sigh of relief. Perhaps Song Yizhen's brotherly love had suddenly erupted, and she suddenly wanted to give him a goodnight kiss. Song Yi felt that he might have scared her last night. But when he saw her relieved look because he had returned to a safe distance, he felt depressed. Is being close to your brother so scary to you? But looking at her relaxed look, he couldn't bear to continue provoking her. He could only suppress his anger. A few days later, Papa Song and Mama Song, who had been waiting for news, received confirmation from the police that the recording was not a joke. They were serious about taking action. Even though they already knew that the conversation between the two in the recording didn't seem to be a prank, Papa Song and Mama Song still felt sad and in disbelief. How could the girl they had doted on since she was a child be so dark? Su Jun and Song Tian were taken away by the police when they were at school. At that time, their classmates were all there, guessing what they had done. In the hearts of these teenagers, being a police officer was still a very serious and sacred profession. Song Tian already had a guilty conscience. When she heard that the police were looking for her, her face turned pale. Her form teacher was a lady in her 30s. When she saw Song Tian's expression, she thought that she was frightened. At this time, she even said to the police, "What's the matter? Song Tian is a student in my class. She's usually a little unruly, but she's still a very nice person." Song Tian did not expect that this usually stern and rigid form teacher would actually speak up for her. She was a little touched. The police interrupted the form teacher. "We can't reveal the details before the details are out. Sorry to disturb you." When Song Tian walked to the school gate, she bumped into Su Jun, who was also taken away by the police. In an instant, her heart fell to the bottom. It was over. Chapter 696. After all, they were just teenagers. A few experienced interrogators scared them a little, and the two of them spilled the beans, telling the whole story. Father Song and Mother Song were already prepared. They were still calm when they heard this, but Father and Mother were really shocked. They went to see Su Jun and Song Tian. Song Tian probably knew that she had gotten into big trouble this time. She rushed over when she saw Father Song and Mother Song. She tried to grab Mother Song's hand. Mom, I was just confused for a moment. I really didn't do it on purpose. I didn't want her life. Mom, you have to believe me." Mother Song waved her hand away. "Who's your mother? Don't call me that." She was really cold to Song Tian. "You've already contacted the people. You were confused for a moment. If you hadn't been found out about what you did." Mother Song closed her eyes. She didn't dare to think about the consequences. Song Tian and Su Jun had already found the people and were just waiting for the right opportunity. Mother Song couldn't forgive the girl in front of her when she thought that if she hadn't been lucky this time, her Yu might have been hit by an accident on the way to school one day. Song Tian was really scared this time. She heard from the police that someone like her was suspected of a criminal offense and would have to go to jail. She was only 16 years old. She was going to take the college entrance examination next year. How could she go to jail? The Song couple didn't move. Only then did Song Tian see the couple standing at the side. They were her last saviors. Mom, save me. I know I was wrong. I really didn't do it on purpose, it was impossible for Mother and not to feel complicated. Her daughter actually wanted to hire someone to kill someone. This kind of thing was completely out of her imagination. Moreover, she was standing there, but Song Tian looked at the Song family first. This made her feel a little uncomfortable. But after all, she was her own daughter. No matter what, Mother and didn't want to see her in such a situation. She looked at the Song couple. Mr. Song, Madam Song, you watched Tian grow up. Mama Song stood up and ignored Mama An. Instead, she said to the police officer, "Officer, I absolutely cannot forgive this kind of thing. Other people's daughters are treasures, but my daughter is also a treasure that I want to hold in my hands." Her meaning was very clear. There was no turning back for this matter. She would deal with it however she wanted. Song Tian went limp. Mr. and Mrs. Song did not want to see her anymore, so they turned and left without hesitation. In the end, Su Jun and Song Tian were convicted of attempted murder and sentenced to 3 years in prison. The Su family had put in a lot of effort to reduce the sentence, but this time, the Song family was determined to be merciless. In the end, they had no choice. 3 years was enough for 2 16-year-old teenagers to completely rewrite their lives. To Gu Xingyin, Song Tian had truly become a thing of the past. The explanation given by the school was that she had taken a leave of absence due to illness. The only people who knew were the form teacher and the principal. If this kind of thing was spread out, it would have a bad impact on the school. The school could not have told the truth back then. From the beginning to the end, no one told Gu Xingyin about this. Gu Xingyin was also happy to enjoy the protection of her family. But this brother was giving her a strange feeling. What should she do? Chapter 697. Song Yi was still doting on his precious little sister, but Gu Xingyin felt that the way he looked at her was getting more and more difficult to understand. In any case, she had experienced so many worlds and had a certain understanding of human emotions. Although Song Yi had concealed his feelings well, he could not help but reveal a trace of it. But Gu Xingyin didn't expect that if Song Yi didn't want her to see some traces, she wouldn't have noticed. "You must be careful." Mother Song reminded the two of them. The summer vacation before the 3rd year of high school arrived. Gu Xingyin didn't need to work part-time as usual, and she didn't need to attend tuition classes. Instead, she prepared to go on a long trip with Song Yi. This suggestion was made by Song Yi, and Father Song and Mother Song thought it was a good idea. In their eyes, it was a good thing for young children to go out and see the world. In the past, Gu Xingyin also thought it was a good idea, but now, Gu Xingyin, she always felt that her brother was up to no good. "What are you thinking about?" Song Yi looked at her with a smile. Gu Xingyin came back to her senses and said with a smile, "Nothing, nothing." Song Yi said helplessly, "You can't stay outside like this. I have to look after you. What if you get lost?" Gu Xingyin, she smiled. "I'm not a child anymore." Song Yi habitually reached out to ruffle her hair. "But my Chin Chin is so cute. I'm afraid that someone will take you away from me." When he said this, he turned his face to Gu Xingyin, and the tenderness in his eyes turned into spring water. Gu Xingyin took a step forward without a trace and shook off his hand. She turned around and looked at him. "Brother, let's go quickly. We won't be able to catch the plane." The warm touch in his hand suddenly disappeared. Song Yi retracted his hand and subconsciously rubbed his thumb and middle finger together, as if recalling the feeling just now. He suppressed the disappointment and unwillingness that had just surged up from the bottom of his heart and smiled. "You're here." Their seats were undoubtedly connected. Song Yi took out an eye mask and gave it to her. "There's still a long time. Sleep for a while. I'll wake you up when we arrive." Gu Xingyin nodded and leaned against the seat with her eyes closed. Perhaps the scent of the person beside her was too reliable and familiar, but she fell asleep immediately. Feeling the weight on his shoulder, Song Yi lowered his head and could see the top of the girl's hair. He moved slightly and adjusted his position slightly so that Gu Xingyin could sleep more comfortably. In the eyes of outsiders, the posture between the two. "Sir, would you like anything to drink?" The stewardess' gentle voice sounded. Song Yi's first eyes, SSSSS half. Seeing that she had no intention of waking up, he was relieved. He put his index finger to his mouth and gently shushed the stewardess. His eyes were handsome and gentle. When he made such a gesture, the air stewardess was caught off guard and blushed. The air stewardess nodded and said enviously, "You're so nice to your lover." Gu Xingyin was half leaning in Song Yi's arms, and his face was blocked. The air stewardess naturally thought that they were a very loving couple, and the two of them were in such an intimate position. Song Yi smiled and didn't deny it. Qin Qin would become his lover sooner or later. Chapter 698. Gu Xingyin had no idea that she had been loved in her dreams. Anyway, when she woke up from her sweet dream, it was already time to get off the plane. The first stop was Yun City. Yun City was a very beautiful city. There were mountains, rivers, and beauties here. Since ancient times, it had been a favorite place for beautiful scenery. When she arrived at this place, it was as if it was a different world from the city she had lived in before. Most of the buildings still retained the style of 100 years ago. They were simple and elegant. On the streets, there were all kinds of enthusiastic and lively figures of ethnic minority girls wearing ethnic costumes and silver jewelry. There was even a girl holding a wreath made of fresh flowers in her hand. She wanted to give it to Song Yi. Song Yi politely thanked her, and then, firmly rejected her. Gu Xingyin curiously asked why. Song Yi helplessly pointed to the front for her to see. Then, Gu Xingyin saw that not far in front, a young man gave a wreath to a beautiful girl. The girl accepted it, and then the surrounding people watched and applauded. The two of them kissed. Here, accepting someone else's garland is equivalent to accepting someone else's love, Song Yi explained. Gu Xingyin suddenly understood. She tilted her head and looked at Song Yi beside her. He was tall and well-built, and his face was so handsome that it could be described as exquisite. The customs here were open, and many girls were openly sizing him up. "Big brother, you're practically a human-shaped luminous body." She pretended to sigh with emotion. Song Yi looked around and said in a low voice with a smile, "But in my eyes, no girl can compare to my Qin Qin." Gu Xingyin's face was calm, but in her heart, she was frantically thinking, "This is flirting, flirting, flirting." How should she reply to appear calmer? In the end, she decided to pretend that she didn't hear it. Okay, Gu Xingyin admitted that she was scared. But when this man fully activated his flirting mode, Gu Xingyin felt that although she was a very moral person, in front of her lover, she couldn't control herself at all. She wanted to talk things out with her brother. But what if he only had brotherly feelings for her? What would Song Yi think of her? A strange girl who fantasized that her own brother liked her. Gu Xingyin covered her face. She was really at a loss. Song Yi was in a good mood as he looked at the girl in front of him with a conflicted expression. She should have gradually become aware of his thoughts. What was she thinking now? How should he explain it to her? Yet he was troubled and didn't know what to say. Very well, this was exactly what Song Yi wanted. That was why she was in such a state. Slowly, she began to accept this matter from the bottom of her heart. He didn't intend to tell Qin Qin that he wasn't her biological brother. Otherwise, he would lose a perfect excuse. Putting aside these small worries, Gu Xingyin admitted that this trip was very satisfying. When she returned home, her skin was tanned and she even lost some weight. Song Yi's mother was very distressed and complained that her son didn't take good care of his sister. Song Yi rubbed his nose and accepted the complaint. It was Gu Xingyin who couldn't stand it and spoke up for him. Mom, don't blame big brother. I'm the one who's tanned on the beach every day. I may look thin, but I've only lost some fat. I'm much more energetic now. Chapter 699. Without the worrisome Song Tian and the Yin family, Gu Xingyin had a very peaceful year. She didn't even have to worry about the college entrance exams with her results. Gu Xingyin was completely calm about the college entrance exams that made countless students nervous and excited. She had participated in the college entrance exams many times. The first time she took it, she felt fresh. After that, she answered the questions as usual and walked out of the exam hall. When the last class ended, Gu Xingyin walked out of the exam hall. She immediately saw Father Song, Mother Song, and Song Yi standing in the crowd. The weather in June was very hot. The sun shone brightly on everything. Gu Xingyin could clearly see that the three of them were sweating from the heat. Even Mother Song's makeup was a little smudged. When had the three of them ever been in such a sorry state? Gu Xingyin's heart ached. She quickly walked over to them. You could have just waited for me at home. Otherwise, you could have just waited in the car. Why are you all standing there in the sun? Mother Song smiled and held her hand. Other children see their family members waiting for them the moment they come out. How can my Yu not have anyone waiting for her? Gu Xingyin's eyes welled up with tears, but she remained stubborn. I'm not that delicate. Song Yi stood at the side and said, let's go back first. Sister Yun has already prepared a feast. We have to celebrate for Qin Qin. Gu Xingyin deliberately said, we have to celebrate now. If I mess up, won't all our efforts be in vain? Father Song opened the car door and let Mother Song in. Then, he sat in the car himself. So what if you mess up? You're my daughter. How can you be tied down by a diploma? It was good to add flowers to brocade. If Gu Xingyin really didn't do well, it wouldn't be a big deal to their family. Gu Xingyin had nothing to do. She saw a magazine beside her seat. Before Song Yi could stop her, she flipped it open. On the first page, there was a big title, Young Master Song and Mysterious Woman are on a date. Good news seems to be coming. The photo in the magazine was not very clear, but one could still make out that Song Yi was chatting happily with a beautiful woman. They looked very intimate. Her heart sank. Although she knew that this was most likely a misunderstanding, she was still very confident in her lover's heart. However, she still felt unhappy when she saw this news. She smiled coldly and turned to look at her brother. Are you going to find me a sister-in-law? Song Yi carefully looked at her expression and suddenly changed his mind about explaining. Instead, he smiled and said, she is a very talented woman. She actually praised him. What made Gu Xingyin the most depressed was that Mother Song, the godly assistant, also said, Yi thinks it's not bad. When you have time, you can bring it home and show it to your mother. Song Yi smiled and casually replied to his mother, avoiding the question. He could use this to provoke little Vinegar Bun, but if he really wanted to bring her home, it wouldn't be easy to solve the problem. After returning home, Gu Xingyin was not in a good mood until dinner. Father Song and Mother Song thought that she was tired from the exams, so they considerately asked her to go back to her room and rest early after dinner. Gu Xingyin washed up early and sat on the bed, reading an English novel. Based on her understanding of a certain man, it was about time for him to come. Chapter 700. It turned out that she knew her lover very well. Before she turned to the third page, the door of her room was opened. Qin Qin. Gu Xingyin didn't get up. She looked at the man who came in with a faint smile. Brother, what are you doing here? Song Yi felt that her indifferent attitude was completely different from usual, but he was very happy in his heart. I saw that you didn't eat much at night, so I came to see if you were uncomfortable. Song Yi sat down on the chair beside her bed. Gu Xingyin closed the book with a bang. Brother, don't you have a confidant? How can you have time to care about me so late? It seemed that she was really annoyed. Song Yi helplessly spread out his hands to clarify. That person is a designer I know. She admires my mother very much. She wants to visit my mother through me. Gu Xingyin continued to be calm. Oh, what does that have to do with me? Song Yi looked at her gently with an expression of, I will tolerate you even if you are unreasonable, and said, I'm afraid that my lovely sister will be jealous and angry. Gu Xingyin was still stubborn. What a joke, I won't be angry. Gu Xingyin's unfinished words were all swallowed by the sudden warmth on her lips. Song Yi finally did what he had always wanted to do. He clasped Gu Xingyin's waist with one hand, not giving her any possibility of retreat. Until he was finally satisfied, Gu Xingyin could breathe. She pushed him away with all her strength and looked at him in disbelief. You're crazy. Song Yi smiled and shook his head. I'm not crazy. I'm very sober. I want to kiss you, Qin Qin. He had wanted to do this for a long time, but he had been holding back. He had planned to wait until she was 18 years old, but tonight the night was too charming, or Gu Xingyin was too charming. He found that he couldn't help it at all. Gu Xingyin was scared to death by this bold man. We are brother and sister. Song Yi's question was completely ignored. Instead, he asked her, when you were kissed by me, your first reaction wasn't disgust or discomfort, but the fact that we're siblings. Does this mean that it's not that you don't have feelings for me, but because of our relationship as siblings, you don't dare to take a step out of the lightning pool? Gu Xingyin had to admit that this man had analyzed her psychology very thoroughly. But so what if his analysis was thorough? They were brother and sister, and this was a gap that could never be crossed. She said calmly, Brother, where's your rationality? Song Yi suddenly laughed. Qin Qin, you're avoiding my question. He suddenly leaned close to Gu Xingyin, his tall figure completely enveloping her petite body sitting on the bed. You're not completely unmoved by me, right? Gu Xingyin lowered her eyes. She couldn't answer this question. Song Yi already knew the answer. He smiled. It wasn't his usual smile that made people feel like they were bathing in the spring breeze. It was a genuine smile that came from the bottom of his heart. Even the tips of his brows and the corners of his eyes were filled with smiles. He was very happy. He couldn't help hugging Gu Xingyin. I'm so happy, Qin Qin. Gu Xingyin was dazzled by this man's pure and happy smile. She could see that this man was very happy because of her acquiescence. But she had to tell him the cruelty of reality. But no. Song Yi raised his hand to cover her mouth. Qin Qin, you worry too much. We're not siblings. What? Gu Xingyin looked up in shock. Chapter 701. Gu Xingyin listened to Song Yi's short story in a daze. Father Song and Mother Song were very close. Back then, Mother Song's body was very weak, and the doctor found that it was very difficult for her to get pregnant. The two of them were disappointed, but they didn't dwell on the matter. They went to the orphanage and adopted Song Yi, who was abandoned at birth for unknown reasons. Who knew that in the third year after Song Yi came to the Song family, the family welcomed a new life. Father Song and Mother Song didn't neglect this son who wasn't their biological son just because of Song Tian's arrival. They didn't hide the truth from Song Yi. When he was 15 years old, they told him the truth. They felt that their son had the right to know his background. Gu Xingyin felt a little dazed. She asked the system, I don't know about this part of the plot. The system replied, the system doesn't know either. The original plot didn't have this part. In other words, this was a hidden part of the plot. After Song Yi finished speaking, he saw that Qin Qin was still in a daze. She was sitting on the bed in a daze, and he felt that she was very cute. He couldn't help but lean over and kiss her forehead. He smiled and said, "When you're 18 years old, I'll talk to Dad and Mom about this." Gu Xingyin came back to her senses. She was still a little dazed. "Dad and Mom won't object?" Seeing that she was obediently following his train of thought, Song Yi smiled and rubbed her hair. "Don't worry about this. I'll take care of Dad and Mom." He stood up. "It's getting late. You should rest early." The door was quietly closed. Gu Xingyin was surprised and happy. She thought that in this life, they were destined to have no future. She didn't expect things to turn around so suddenly. System. She was a little happy. The system's white light flashed. "Congratulations, host." Gu Xingyin smiled for a while. She felt that she was a little silly. She hugged the pillow and fell asleep. After returning home from the trip, it was almost time for school to start. Gu Xingyin's college entrance exam results were very good. She could go to any university in the country. However, the Song family loved their daughter. The city's university was already quite famous in the country. In addition, Gu Xingyin didn't need to go to those universities in the capital to make herself look good, so she chose the city's university. On the first day of school, Song Yi drove her to school. With a capable brother like Song Yi around, all Gu Xingyin had to do was move a stool over and eat snacks while Song Yi tirelessly helped her pack her luggage. He even made the bed for her. In fact, Gu Xingyin knew all these, but she just enjoyed the feeling of being pampered. The conditions of the four-person apartment-type dormitory were not bad. While Song Yi was tidying up, his other roommates also arrived one after another. Other than Gu Xingyin, none of the other three were locals. Although the dormitory was air-conditioned, they were still sweating from tidying up on such a hot day. At this moment, everyone was looking enviously at Gu Xingyin, who was sitting there leisurely, drawing aggro. At the same time, they glanced at Song Yi, who was working with a red face. "This man is really handsome. You're all Qin Qin's roommates. Our Qin Qin is spoiled at home. She's still young, so please take care of her in the future." Song Yi smiled gently at Gu Xingyin's three roommates. He didn't restrain his hormones at all. He was right. And Qinyu hadn't even gone to kindergarten. She was in the first grade at a very young age. She was generally 1 or 2 years younger than her peers. The three of them blushed and nodded repeatedly. They all promised to take good care of Gu Xingyin in the future. Gu Xingyin was speechless as she watched Song Yi use his beauty to successfully bribe her future roommates. Chapter 702. After Song Yi treated everyone in the dormitory to a meal, the three of them had become his fangirls. They almost patted their chests and assured him that as long as they were there, Gu Xingyin would never be bullied at school. Gu Xingyin felt funny. It was as if she had been bullied before. Song Yi left Gu Xingyin's dormitory reluctantly. At this time, he tasted the bitter fruit of his own actions. He didn't have time and space to say goodbye to Qin Qin alone. The advantage of going to university in the city was that Gu Xingyin could go home when she was free. If Song Yi was like her, he could also drive to her school to visit. Gu Xingyin's entire dormitory knew that Gu Xingyin had a brother who spoiled his sister. He doted on his sister and was generous. Most importantly, he had a beautiful face that could make one eat more bowl of rice after seeing it. What surprised Gu Xingyin was that although the girls in the dormitory kept talking about how handsome her brother was, like fangirls, none of them had ever asked her for her phone number. She asked out of curiosity one day. Her roommate, Tutu, who was lazily painting her nails at the noodle shop, said, "What's so strange about that? We like your brother just because he's handsome. To us, he's like the bright moon in the sky. We can see him but can't touch him. It's good to be an idol for this kind of person. In real life, he's a person from a completely different world. They were all people who understood in their hearts. After getting along for several months, they knew that Gu Xingyin's roommates' clothes and necessities could easily cost them a month's living expenses. They probably also knew how different a family like the Song family was from an ordinary family. How could such a man take a fancy to a few young students like them? When Gu Xingyin went home next time and told Song Yi this, Song Yi just smiled and reached out his hand to rub the top of her head. Qin Qin's roommates were not bad. Song Yi's actions were really fast. At the end of the first year of university, Gu Xingyin had just turned 18, and he took the initiative to confess to Papa and Mama Song. He even took the initiative to pick a time when Gu Xingyin was out with a few friends. The son fell in love with the daughter. Although this son was not their biological son, Papa Song and Mama Song were still a little confused. Although they did have such thoughts when their daughter was just born, those thoughts had already faded away in the later years of their lives. However, Song Yi's determination moved them. In this lifetime, other than Qin Qin, I will not like any other girl. So, by the time Gu Xingyin returned home from her vacation, she discovered that everything had been settled. After accepting the fact that their son liked their younger daughter, Mr. and Mrs. Song suddenly felt that it wasn't too bad. They knew how Song Yi treated Gu Xingyin. To be honest, they probably wouldn't be able to find another man in this world who would treat Qin Qin so well. The 4 years of university were relaxing and happy for Gu Xingyin. At the graduation ceremony of the 4th year, no one noticed that there was an extra ring on Gu Xingyin's hand. Song Yi felt that he couldn't wait at all. He finally waited until Qin Qin graduated from university. This little white rabbit was already very fat. He couldn't wait to eat her up. Only when she completely belonged to him, his heart would really calm down. He reached out his hand to touch his wildly beating heart. Chapter 703. Song Tian stepped out of that place. The sun was shining brightly outside. She felt that her heart, which had almost gone numb from the silence, was finally recovering a little. She couldn't help but look back at the mottled white wall. There were many people here. Every day, there would be people coming in and going out. Tian Tian. An excited voice sounded. On the other side of the wall, Mr. and Mrs. N, as well as her unfamiliar sister, and Qinchi, were all standing there looking at her. Mrs. N stood in the middle. She seemed to have aged a lot in the past 3 years. Song Tian thought in a daze. She didn't even have white hair before. His feet had already started walking towards that direction. Dad, Mom, Sister. She called out softly as tears fell down her cheeks. The feeling of freedom and family was so wonderful. Mom made a lot of good dishes. My Tian Tian, you've lost so much weight. Mrs. N felt sorry for Song Tian. She had lost a lot of weight. She was wearing a simple plaid shirt and light-colored jeans. She was thin and small. Under her short hair was an unhealthy pale complexion. This was the result of not being exposed to the sun for many years. Song Tian smiled slightly. Mom, I'm fine. I'm fine now. She was really fine. In the past 3 years, what she wanted the most was to come out. She would be able to come out one day. It was this thought that made her endure for 3 years. Otherwise, she was afraid that she wouldn't even last a year. Being able to stand outside freely and look at the unfamiliar yet familiar streets was enough to move her to tears. She didn't talk about what she had experienced in the past 3 years. If she did, it would only make her family feel sad and worried. It was better to bury it in the deepest part of her heart and never think about it again. After 3 years, she couldn't think about high school anymore. In the end, Song Tian went to a professional school. After 3 years, she graduated and worked as a customer service representative in an e-commerce company. Her life was very ordinary. She earned 2 to 3,000 yuan a month. When she saw something she liked, she would check the price first. Most of the time, she could only look at it. She began to go to the mall and pay attention to the discounts. She bought the cheap products that she didn't like at all in the past. She was relatively free today. A few colleagues beside her were chatting. Hey, hey, hey. I saw the news. The young master of the Song Corporation got married. A girl exclaimed. Song Tian's attention was drawn over. In this city, there was only one person who could be called the young master of the Song family. On the computer screen was a picture of a newlywed couple wearing rings. This photo was obviously released by the officials, and it was very beautiful. Song Yi's head was lowered in concentration, and the girl in front of him was smiling sweetly. Pa! The cup in Song Tian's hand fell to the ground and shattered into pieces. Aya, Song Tian, what's wrong? Her colleague turned around and frowned at her. Song Tian forced a smile. My hand slipped. I'm sorry. I'll clean it up immediately. Song Yi and Song Qinyu. How could this be? Weren't they siblings? Song Tian's heart was in a mess. She hurriedly packed up and started to search for information related to the Song family. All these years, she had always carefully avoided anything related to the Song family. The 2 words Song family had become a forbidden zone that she did not dare to touch. Soon, she got the answer she wanted. 2 years ago, the Song family had announced that their eldest son, Song Yi, was not their biological son. Song Tian looked at the news in a daze. What did this have to do with her? No matter what the relationship between the 2 of them was, it had nothing to do with her. She took a last look at the latest news. In the picture, the newlyweds were snuggling together and smiling sweetly. Even through the screen, she seemed to be able to feel the love flowing between the 2 of them. She crossed out the image on the top right corner. Song Tian changed her cup and poured herself a new cup of water. Those were things in another world. Chapter 704. Gu Xingyin looked at the place where she was. This was a wooden house. She sat on a bed made of a large piece of bluestone. There were many layers of white blankets made of unknown animal fur on top of it. It was soft and comfortable. Looking at the whole room, it was obvious that this place had been carefully arranged and cleaned. The room was spotless, and all kinds of utensils were neatly arranged. But no matter how carefully it was tidied up, it still could not erase the fact that the things here were very simple, and could even be called rough. This was a world of orcs that had not been fully developed. Orcs were different from any form of life form that Gu Xingyin had seen before. They could freely switch between human and beast. In daily life, they had the intelligence of a human. When they changed into beast form in battle, they could explode with more powerful fighting power than real beasts. In this world, there was no unified kingdom. Each tribe was self-reliant, and friction and annexation were common things. Orcs were divided into 2 types, male and female. Gu Xingyin automatically thought of these 2 types of orcs as men and women on Earth. Male orcs were responsible for hunting, fighting, and physical work. Female orcs were responsible for some light work. Of course, their most important ability was to give birth. If there was a difference between female orcs and women, it would probably be their preciousness. The name of this continent was very simple and crude. Because it was full of orcs, it was called the Orc Continent. The ratio of male and female orcs in the Orc Continent was very different. Usually, in a tribe, there might be thousands of male orcs, but there might not be more than 100 female orcs. With this ratio, every female orc was the most precious treasure in the tribe. Not to mention, they could give birth to little orcs. Newborn little orcs were the foundation to ensure the continued strength of the tribe. Because of the scarcity of female orcs, there was usually an unwritten rule in the tribe. That was, a female orc could mate with several male orcs at the same time. Gu Xingyin's body was a female orc. Moreover, her identity was very unusual. She was not only a female orc, but also the most respected high priestess in the tribe. Primitive tribes were very dependent on nature. They believed in nature and the beast god. The high priest was the messenger through which they communicated with the beast deity. However, a high priest was extremely hard to come by. She had to possess shaman power, be able to predict good and bad luck, and even know about the changes in the weather. She had to be knowledgeable. Some small tribes didn't even have a high priest. Gu Xingyin's current body, Wu Luo, was the high priest of the Owl tribe, a powerful tribe in the Beastmen continent. The Owl tribe was one of the most powerful and rich tribes on this plane. The only tribe that could match the Owl tribe was the Force tribe, which was separated by a wide river. In this world, Gu Xingyin's mission target was a fox girl from the Li clan. The fox girl Vicar was a very beautiful girl. She had the innate charm of the Fox clan. She was very popular in the Li clan. The patriarch and the #1 warrior of the Li clan were her guests. Vicar had always wanted to be the high priestess of the Li clan, but the high priestess of the Li clan said that she didn't have any sorcery power, so she couldn't become the high priestess. The high priestess was related to the rise and fall of a tribe. Even if the patriarch of the Li clan liked Vicar a lot, he couldn't agree to her request. Vicar was proud and arrogant. She already had a grudge against Wu Luo. During the last Beast clan meeting, an incident made her hate Wu Luo. Chapter 705. The strong tribes were qualified to host the alliance. This time, it was the Li tribe's turn to be the host. Everyone's seat was designated for the Beast clan alliance. The most honorable seats in the front row were for the high priest and clan leader with the highest status in each tribe. Vicar had always gotten whatever he wanted in the Li tribe. That time, Vicar did something that made Vicar sit beside him. At that time, the other tribes did not say anything. When the high priest of the Owl tribe, Wu Luo, who had just arrived, saw Vicar sitting there, her face darkened and she turned to leave. Although she did not say anything, the way she looked at Vicar was full of arrogance and disdain. What Vicar could not stand was that after Wu Luo left, the people of the Owl tribe also left. Then, tribes that were not on good terms with the Owl tribe and tribes that were not used to the way the Li tribe did things left one after another. The Li tribe's alliance became a joke in the eyes of the other tribes. Vicar was also blamed by the people in the tribe for this matter for a long time. Although she was gradually forgiven by the tribe, she bore a grudge against the main culprit, Wu Luo. Even the Owl tribe became a thorn in her side. She was beautiful and knew how to use her advantages. She easily won the hearts of many strong male orcs in the tribe. With their support, the voices of dissent were silenced by cruelty. Vicar became the first orc without wizard power to become the high priest of a tribe. After becoming the high priest of the Li tribe, the first thing Vicar did was to settle the score with the Owl tribe. For this, she even used her status as the high priest of the Li tribe to tempt the leaders of the nearby tribes to cooperate with the Li tribe. The two tribes were the strongest tribes in the vicinity and their abilities were on par. However, the Li tribe was already prepared. In addition, they had many allies. The result of the battle was tragic. At the critical moment, Wu Luo gathered all the wizard power in his body and prayed to the beast god, asking for the beast god's blessing to give the warriors of the Owl tribe great power. It was also because of this blessing that the few remaining warriors of the Owl tribe exploded with great battle power. They protected the remaining females and little orcs of the beast tribe and escaped. As for Wu Luo, he had overdrawn his energy and the Grand Priestess's weak body. Hence, he had not been able to hold on during the escape. Gu Xingyin retracted her thoughts and looked down at her fingers. It was a pair of slender and fair fingers that did not match the entire orc world. The orcs in this world were generally strong and rough. Even the female orcs, who were known as weak, would definitely be strong enough to carry a gunny sack if they were in another world. However, Wu Luo was different. Gu Xingyin sensed her body. She was even weaker than when she was Song Qinyu in the previous world. However, at the same time, she felt a trace of power from this body that was not weak. This energy was wizard power. Gu Xingyin's understanding of true qi and magic power was similar in nature. Wizard power came from faith, from praying to the beast god, and from being bestowed by the heavens. This was the saying of the beast men continent. However, Gu Xingyin knew that this wizard power was actually similar to true qi in the world of swordsmen. Those who were born with wizard power were actually equivalent to having sword heart. There was no such thing as a beast god. Chapter 706. The so-called people who possessed wizard power were born with this physique. However, the orcs did not have a systematic cultivation method. Hence, most of the high priests would find it difficult to improve in their lifetime. It was rumored that praying could make wizard power stronger. It was actually a method similar to meditation. The orcs had stumbled upon a method by accident. According to this level of development, perhaps the entire beast men continent would slowly develop for thousands of years. Eventually, there would be an amazing beast man who would invent a set of cultivation methods suitable for the high priests to practice and become stronger. At that time, a new situation would appear on the beast men continent. System: randomly choose the ability. Gu Xingyin prayed silently. It would be best if she could draw the ability she wanted. The world of swordsmanship. Gu Xingyin was delighted. Thank goodness. She had just checked her body and realized that the wizard power in her body was very similar to vital energy. She had an idea in her heart: if she cultivated according to the method of circulating vital energy, could she succeed? The result was a pleasant surprise. There was no problem at all. This also meant that she might be able to bring a huge gift to the owl tribe and even to this continent. For this reason, she asked the system, if I invent this cultivation method, will I be detected and rejected by the laws? The system replied, no. Wu Luo was a wizard. Wu Luo was originally a brilliant person. Moreover, the improvement of the world is a good thing for the world order. Gu Xingyin nodded. She had already found a way to make the entire owl tribe strong and even to connect to the orc continent. As for the Li tribe and Vicar, in the face of absolute power, what else could they do? There was a soft knock on the door. Gu Xingyin's face was cold and arrogant. Come in. A small female orc came in with a wooden tray in her hands. She looked at Gu Xingyin with admiration and said respectfully, High Priest, your lunch. In the eyes of the owl tribe, Wu Luo was high and inviolable. Her usual personality was also like that. She always had a calm and indifferent look, as if nothing could leave a trace in her eyes. However, this appearance, in front of the owl clan, was also proof of the mysterious and powerful. Reality proved that no matter what world one was in, brainless fans existed. Gu Xingyin nodded at the female beast, indicating that she understood. After the female beast left, Gu Xingyin realized that she was a little hungry. She looked at the food on the plate. It was roasted meat. The meat was sliced very thinly and roasted until it was golden in color. It smelled very tempting. She picked up a piece and took a bite. It tasted good, soft and chewy, but there was no salt. Not only was there no salt, there wasn't even any seasoning. Gu Xingyin endured the nausea and ate 2 slices before he could not eat anymore. She felt that. Before imparting the cultivation technique, she had to first teach the Shao clan members that they needed to put something in their food. After lunch, Gu Xingyin pushed open the door and walked out. An extremely primitive scene appeared in front of her. As the high priest, Wu Luo's house was at the center of the entire tribe. This was also a form of protection for the high priest. No matter what happened, she would not be affected. All kinds of wooden houses of various sizes came into view. They looked simple and crude, but they had a pure sense of beauty to them. Not far in front of them, a few female beasts were weaving something, and a group of little beast men were playing the most primitive game of tag. Chapter 707. Looking at the little beast men, Gu Xingyin's eyes lit up. So cute. These little beast men were still very young and could not fully transform into human form. Hence, Gu Xingyin watched as a group of cute little creatures with furry ears and fluffy tails ran in front of her. Gu Xingyin held it in for a while, but in the end, she could not help but walk towards them. The group of female beast men noticed her immediately and quickly lowered their heads to salute her. They were very surprised and a little uneasy. Usually, the high priestess never went out. Was something going to happen? Gu Xingyin looked at them and felt a little helpless. She finally knew why Wu Luo's body was so weak. She was a complete homebody who never went out to exercise or enjoy the sun. It would be strange if her body was healthy. She maintained her noble and cold attitude and said calmly, "Don't worry, I'm just out for a walk." The female beast men finally relaxed and watched the high priestess walk towards the little beast men. Seeing Gu Xingyin walk over, the little beast men subconsciously stopped playing. They were still very young. Although they knew that the high priestess was a very powerful person, they did not really worship her from the bottom of their hearts. Hence, they all looked at Gu Xingyin with their round eyes in amazement. They were simply too cute. Gu Xingyin sighed for the second time. The little beast men were the most precious little fellows in the tribe. They wore little clothes that were carefully sewn by the female beast men using the softest fur. They were so small that they were wrapped in thick fur. It was simply irresistible. Gu Xingyin squatted down in front of them. Probably because her intentions were too obvious, the little beast men looked at her curiously. One of them could not help but ask, "High Priestess, do you want to play with us?" The female beast men who had been paying attention to them were shocked by this bold question. Who did not know that the High Priestess did not like noise? They hoped that she would not be angry. There was even a female beast who stood up and wanted to come over to take the little orc away so as not to disturb the high priest's peace. Unexpectedly, Gu Xingyin nodded. "That's right. Are you willing to let me play with you?" The female beast stopped in her tracks. She looked at Gu Xingyin blankly, then her heart was filled with ecstasy. The high priestess was actually willing to lower herself to play with the little beast men. Her child was among them. What a great honor it was. She turned around and returned to her original spot to share the exciting news with the other female beasts. The little beast man who spoke earlier looked at Gu Xingyin with his big eyes and said softly, "High Priestess, you are so beautiful. We are willing to play with you." Gu Xingyin could not help but smile. She simply sat up on the ground and beckoned the little beast men to come over. She gently pointed her finger at the ground, and a magical scene appeared. The sand on the ground seemed to have its own consciousness. It automatically formed together as if there was a pair of skillful hands moving slowly. Soon, a simple model of a house appeared in front of the little beast men. This little house was similar to the houses that the beast men built themselves, but it was more exquisite. Gu Xingyin did not dare to go too far. If she really built a beautiful castle, the world law was not stupid. It would definitely make her leave immediately. Wow! Gu Xingyin received a lot of starry eyes. Chapter 708. High Priestess, you're amazing. The little leopard orc with furry ears looked at Gu Xingyin with admiration. Gu Xingyin couldn't help but reach out and touch his furry ears. Junior Leopard's face turned red. His mother told him that only his future female orc could touch his ears. But, he blinked and looked at the High Priestess. If it's the High Priestess, it's fine. Junior Leopard's face turned even redder at the thought. While the little orcs were having fun, the female orcs started to worry. Of course, they knew how the High Priestess did it. That was the legendary wizard power. The High Priestess was using such a precious thing to play with the little orcs. They were happy that the High Priestess liked the little orcs, but they were also worried that it was too wasteful. Perhaps because the little orcs were too cute, Gu Xingyin taught them how to build their favorite things out of sand. Before they knew it, an entire afternoon had passed. In the evening, the male orcs who had gone out to hunt came back. Aoris immediately saw the High Priestess playing with the little orcs. The dim sunlight shone on her face, giving her usual cold expression a gentle glow. She even had a smile on her face as she taught the little beast men how to build a small house. The male orcs saw the High Priestess too. They quickly put down the prey in their hands and bowed to Gu Xingyin. Gu Xingyin snapped out of her daze and stood up. She instantly turned back into the High Priestess who didn't enter on her birthday. The little orcs didn't know how the gentle and beautiful High Priestess suddenly became like this. They all looked at her nervously. Gu Xingyin said a few words to the male orcs and asked them to leave. She turned around and saw the little orcs looking at her blankly. Were they scared by her? She sighed and winked at them, revealing a relaxed smile. The little orcs beamed with joy again. The High Priestess was still the same gentle lord. Orvis couldn't help but turn around to look at Gu Xingyin. He happened to see Gu Xingyin winking and smiling at the little orc. The image of the High Priest who wasn't his usual self was deeply imprinted in his mind. The High Priestess was really beautiful. It turned out that she liked little beast men so much. Orvis suddenly thought of something and blushed. During dinner, Gu Xingyin was once again surprised by the Owl Tribe's orcs. The High Priestess, who had always waited for someone to send food to her room, actually came out in person. The Owl Clan's dinner was eaten together by the entire tribe. At night, the entire tribe lit up with bonfires. The orcs, who had been busy all day, sat on the grass and enjoyed the fruits of their labor. Some prey was being roasted on the fire, emitting a tempting fragrance. A large copper pot was burning red. There were pieces of beast meat in it, and some fragrant wild vegetables. Seeing Gu Xingyin's arrival, the orcs quickly cleared a space in the middle and carefully spread a thick layer of animal skin on the grass. The High Priestess's body was weak. This was a fact that the entire tribe knew. Gu Xingyin was about to announce a piece of news at this time. Chapter 709. She stood up. Unlike most of the orcs in the tribe who wore animal skins, the High Priestess wore plain white clothes made of linen. Such clothes were very soft and took a lot of energy. In the whole tribe, only the High Priestess had such treatment. At this moment, she was standing in the night wind. Her empty white robe was blown up by the wind. Her slender body seemed like the High Priestess would be blown away if the wind was a little stronger. Orvis sat not far from her. He had an impulse to immediately go to her side and block the wind for her. At this time, Gu Xingyin spoke. Last night, I received a revelation from the beast god. Her voice was not loud, but it was clearly transmitted to the ears of every orc in the Owl tribe, including the orcs who were patrolling outside and not here. Such an ability made the Owl tribe respect the High Priestess even more. The meaning in Gu Xingyin's words made them all respectful. Hearing the words, beast god, all the orcs stood up spontaneously and bowed their heads in the direction of Gu Xingyin. In their minds, the High Priestess was the spokesperson of the beast god in the orc continent. What the beast god looked like, the orcs had never seen it. In contrast, the high priestess who could bring wealth and prosperity to the owl tribe was undoubtedly more revered by them. Then, Gu Xingyin's next words made everyone ecstatic. My owl tribe will become the most powerful tribe in the Orc continent. The people of the owl tribe will become the most powerful orcs in the Orc continent. Long live the beast god. Everyone was shocked by this news. They would not suspect that Gu Xingyin was lying. In this world, no orc dared to joke about the beast god. The beast god told me how to become a high priestess and continue to practice. If Gu Xingyin had just drawn a big pie for the owl tribe, then her words now were telling them how to eat this pie. All the beast men looked at Gu Xingyin in surprise. A priest was such a precious resource. In such a large tribe like the owl tribe, there were only a few orcs who had the potential to become a priest, and only High Priest Wu Luo could be the high priest of a tribe. Priests had to possess witchcraft, which was bestowed by the innate beast god. Now, the high priest said that other orcs also had hope of becoming priests. A powerful high priest, to a tribe, was no doubt the existence of a sea-stabilizing needle. If the owl tribe could have many priests. Thinking of this possibility, all the orcs were so excited that their eyes turned red. From tomorrow onwards, bring 10 little beastmen to me every day. I will observe them one by one and see which one can become a priest. After Gu Xingyin finished speaking, she returned to her original spot and sat down. He had said enough for today. Let them digest it first. As expected, the entire owl tribe was immersed in an excited atmosphere. That night, even many adult orcs did not sleep. The next day, Gu Xingyin had just woken up when she noticed a group of orcs standing neatly outside. What time is it now? Gu Xingyin was stunned. The system replied, if it's converted to a 24-hour system, it's only 6:00 in the morning. 6:00 in the morning. Gu Xingyin pushed the door open. As expected, there were water droplets on the heads of the orcs outside. It was obviously formed by the morning fog. The little orcs were fine. They were all held in the arms of their respective parents and wrapped tightly in animal skin. Some of them were even sleeping soundly. Chapter 7:10. Seeing Gu Xingyin open the door, the orcs hurriedly woke up the little orcs in their arms. Then, they bowed to Gu Xingyin. Come in. The orcs entered the door cautiously. The little orcs were braver. A few of them had played games with Gu Xingyin the other day. Now that they saw her, they ran over fearlessly. The little leopard even hugged Gu Xingyin's thigh. Gu Xingyin pushed him away helplessly. She said, all right, we're not here to play games today. Stand properly. After all, she still had a lot of authority. The little orcs all stood properly. Starting from the first one, Gu Xingyin walked to his side. She reached out her index finger and tapped the space between his eyebrows. A faint white light flickered on her finger. This made the orcs feel surprised and respectful. Actually, she could have hidden the light completely. She purposely revealed it to make the orcs more convinced. Since they believed in the beast god, she would borrow the name of the god that didn't exist. The little orc only felt a slight chill between his eyebrows. It wasn't uncomfortable. Then, a warm feeling spread from between his eyebrows and swept through his entire body. It was as if his entire body was soaked in hot water. It was very comfortable. When Gu Xingyin's hand left, he was even a little reluctant. The orcs all looked at Gu Xingyin eagerly. They all saw what Gu Xingyin did just now. Could she find out if the little orc could become a priest just like that? What was the result? Gu Xingyin didn't say anything. Instead, she ordered the orcs to bring the little orc to the side. She continued to check on the next little orc. She checked them one by one. When the last little orc was checked, 2 hours had passed. Wu Luo's face was already pale. Now, it was even paler. Even his forehead was covered in fine beads of sweat. She needed to use her wizard power to examine the bodies of all the little beast men. This was a task that consumed a lot of wizard power. Her prediction was not wrong. 10 was her limit. The orcs also saw that she was weak, and their expressions changed drastically as they asked her if she was all right. If the high priestess fell ill because of this, they would never forgive themselves. Gu Xingyin waved her hand, indicating that she was fine. She told them that she needed to rest well and that there was no need for lunch. After the food was served, she asked them to leave. She did not sleep. Instead, she sat cross-legged on the bed and began to cultivate slowly. She had already tried to cultivate her wizard power using the method of cultivating vital energy. If that was the case, meditating was a better method than sleeping. When she opened her eyes again, her complexion had returned to its usual pale white. After standing up from the bed, she no longer felt weak and powerless. She gently extended a finger and tapped it on the ground. An invisible force suddenly shot out, causing a crack to appear on the limestone floor. Gu Xingyin was very satisfied. She still looked weak on the outside, but her skills had undergone an earth-shattering change. She thought of the 10 little orcs that day. According to the way the orcs chose the high priestess, none of them were qualified. Those who were born with wizard power that was strong enough to be discovered by the priest, such as Wu Luo, would be geniuses who would be fought over by all the major sects in the world of sword cultivators. Such a person, in the entire Owl clan tribe, was hard to come by even in a few decades. Chapter 7:11. However, if she were to select ordinary orcs who could cultivate sorcery, there would be 3 among the little orcs who could resonate with sorcery within their bodies. 3 out of 10 people were like that. This ratio was already terrifying. Being able to resonate with sorcery, even if it was weak, meant that they could cultivate along with it. As long as they could cultivate, their future combat power would not be something that the orcs who only relied on their strength and instincts could compare to. As for the little orcs who could not cultivate, Gu Xingyin could also teach them some simple ways to cultivate their bodies. Even if they could not be compared to the orcs who cultivated sorcery, they would still be much stronger than the orcs of today. Ever since Gu Xingyin knew that she had drawn the cultivation methods and techniques of the world of swordsmen, she had a wild ambition in her heart. She wanted to build a unique, powerful empire that would unify the orcs. At night, she once again appeared at the place where the orcs gathered. Since she wanted to play the role of a guide, she could not just stand on the high altar, but had to interact more with the orcs to make them more convinced. Gu Xingyin gave the chief, Taman, a few drawings. She used an extremely thin black pen to sketch a plant with large leaves. Although there was no color, it was very realistic. This is a gift from the beast god that can make the food more delicious, she explained. In fact, she could not stand the tastelessness of the food, so she directly asked the system for the plants that could be used as seasoning in this world. The chief, Taman, had always been very respectful to the high priestess. He immediately passed these few leaves to the male orcs who were going out to hunt tomorrow, and instructed them to remember to step on them when they saw them tomorrow. The next day, 10 little orcs were examined by Gu Xingyin using sorcery. This time, their luck was not as good as yesterday. Out of 10 little orcs, only one of them had a weak wave of sorcery. It seemed that the high ratio yesterday was just a coincidence. At night, the male beasts returned from their hunting trip and brought back many plants for Gu Xingyin. Gu Xingyin took a rough look and didn't know whether to laugh or cry when she discovered that there really were all kinds of plants inside. It seemed that those orcs couldn't really differentiate what kind of plant it was. As long as they saw something similar, they would grab it and bring it back. In fact, Gu Xingyin felt a little dizzy looking at these plants that looked almost the same. Fortunately, she had the system, so in less than an hour, she finished counting all these things. When she was cooking the meat soup at night, she gave a few of the plants to the female beasts and told them to grind them into juice and put it in the soup. In addition, when they were roasting meat, they should spread it evenly on the meat. The high priest's words were always right. The female beasts did as she said without any hesitation. After the roasted meat was cooked, they cut off the most tender part and placed it on a leaf, placing it in front of her on a tray. Gu Xingyin gently picked up a piece and put it into her mouth. What a nostalgic feeling! As the delicious food entered her mouth, she couldn't help but smile. Orvis, who had been secretly observing the high priest, blushed again. He couldn't help but think, how could the high priest smile so beautifully? Gu Xingyin glanced at Orvis from the corner of her eyes. This guy, he was always secretly watching me. Did he really think that I wouldn't notice? Chapter 7:12. There were not many little orcs in the owl tribe. There were thousands of orcs in the tribe, and there were less than 200 little orcs under the age of 10. Among these 200 little orcs, there were about 30 of them who could cultivate wizard power. Gu Xingyin also realized that orcs with weaker bodies, such as the deer tribe and the cat tribe, were more likely to have wizard power in their bodies than orcs with stronger bodies. For example, orcs like the tiger tribe and the lion tribe were naturally suited to be powerful warriors, but not suited to cultivate wizard power. After checking on the little orcs, Gu Xingyin announced her results on a day when the entire tribe was resting and praying. She read out the names one by one, and the orcs below started to get excited. When she finished reading out 30 names, the owl tribe was already boiling. They originally thought that having 5 or 6 little orcs who could cultivate wizard power in their tribe was already very powerful. This meant that the orcs might have 5 or 6 priests in the future. However, the high priest said that there were 30 of them. 30 priests, just thinking about it made the orcs' blood boil. Gu Xingyin looked at them and knew that even though he had said those words back then, they clearly hadn't understood what he meant. Although she said that the owl tribe would become the most powerful tribe, their thinking was still on the level of the tribe. Only when they were truly powerful could they have greater ambitions. She announced that for a long time in the future, these 30 little orcs would follow her and learn from her. As for the other orcs and little orcs, she did not give up. Instead, she gave the leader of the owl tribe a thick parchment. The parchment used simple orc language and lifelike pictures to tell the orcs what to do. According to the method on this parchment, you will most likely become warriors who are more powerful than priests. Gu Xingyin said loudly. To a large extent, these words were meant to encourage those warriors, because if they couldn't cultivate wizard power, it would be very difficult for them to achieve great things just by training their bodies. Unless that person had great perseverance, great wisdom, and great opportunities. Thinking of this, Gu Xingyin could not help but look at Orvis, who was among the male orcs. This was her lover, but she was not prepared to acknowledge him now. Without enough strength to crush the entire clan, if one wanted to be together with the most honorable high priest of the Owl clan, it was absolutely impossible to get recognition. The orcs of the surrounding tribes discovered that the Owl clan had recently become mysterious. Usually, they could always be seen during the day when they went out to hunt. Occasionally, the orcs would even fight over some prey. But now, the hunting time of the Owl tribe's orcs during the day seemed to have been greatly shortened. Even if both sides besieged a prey at the same time, the Owl tribe's orcs would give it to them when they were in a good mood. Many tribes felt that it was strange, and some even secretly wanted to find out what was going on. But how could the current Owl clan let them succeed? The high priest had said that everything that the beast deity had told her was highly confidential and could not be revealed to outsiders in the short term. Otherwise, she would suffer the most severe punishment. As the leader of a tribe, Tamon understood the importance of these things. He even made every beastman swear in front of the beast god that they would never spread this information. The male orcs of the Owl tribe really did not have time. During the day, they tried their best to hunt for the entire tribe's rations as fast as possible, went home early, and started practicing what the high priest had taught them. Time was the most precious thing. This was what the high priest had taught them. Chapter 7:13. What has the Owl tribe been doing recently? The chief of the Li tribe, Guli, frowned. He was a powerful black panther. When he turned into a human, his eyes were deep and sharp. At this moment, his upper body was naked, and under his strong muscles was vigorous power. The Li tribe and the Owl tribe were separated by a wide river. The two tribes were equal in strength, and they never gave up on each other. The Owl tribe's defense was very tight. The Li tribe's orcs couldn't enter the Owl tribe's territory. They could only roughly observe that the Owl tribe seemed to be very anxious recently. No matter when they saw the Owl tribe's male orcs, the other party was in a hurry. There's no big news coming out. It's definitely not a big deal. Why do you care about him? A charming voice came out. At the same time, a fluffy big tail wrapped around Guli's waist. Guli's eyebrows trembled, and his serious mouth hooked up into a smile. He took the little goblin into his arms. So flirtatious early in the morning. Didn't I satisfy you last night? As he said, his hand had already touched below. Vickers' gorgeous face flushed with his movements. The tail that was wrapped around Guli's waist began to rub his body more wantonly. Soon, he had a reaction. You little goblin. The following words were somewhat unclear. Outside the Li tribe's chief's tent, only Vickers' coquettish gasps could be heard. The Owl tribe's orcs were very busy every day. The orcs didn't know what the little orc learned from the high priest every day. They also rarely asked the little orc. In their eyes, witchcraft had always been the most mysterious existence. They were not qualified to touch it. The male orcs who contacted according to the method on the parchment every day didn't feel any effect at first. Out of worship for the high priest, they persevered without hesitation. Until half a month later, they slowly found that the power in their bodies seemed to be stronger. In the past, in order to hunt for a whole day's rations for the whole tribe, the male orcs who were responsible for hunting had to go out for a whole day. These days, in order to find time to practice that set of moves, they began to finish their daily tasks as soon as possible and came back to practice as soon as possible. At first, they didn't notice the difference, but Gu Xingyin had been paying attention to the changes. At first, the orcs had to wait until it was almost dark before they could return. This was their normal strength. According to the time she was familiar with, it was about 5 in the afternoon. Gradually, when they returned, the sun hanging in the sky was getting higher and higher. Half a month later, this time had already been pushed forward by more than an hour. Ta Meng was both surprised and happy. He couldn't wait to tell Gu Xingyin the news. Lord High Priest, the Owl clan thanks you. Thank you for the beast god's gift. Originally, the status of the patriarch was equivalent to that of the high priest, but now, Ta Meng had automatically placed himself one level lower than the high priest. His way of thinking was the same as all the other orcs. It was very simple, the strong would be the king. And Gu Xingyin was not only strong, she had made the entire Owl clan stronger. Gu Xingyin's current reputation in the Owl tribe was far greater than his, the clan leader. Even Ta Meng did not doubt that if the high priest wanted to remove his position as the clan leader, the people of the Owl tribe would not object. Even he would reflect on himself at the first moment, whether he had done something wrong. This was the power of faith. You're tuning into the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.